All right, welcome. This is Orion Rising. I'm your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into the show. Show this out, show this out, show this out. All right, welcome. It's Friday night, the Law of One. It's Friday, November 22nd, 2024, 3:04 p.m. West Coast America time. Star date 78359.7. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Wait, let me take down this banner so you're not looking at my ugly mug here. Let me get back to the banners and pull that down. There we go. Let me put myself up in full screen so we're not looking at that blank screen with the thing on it there. Okay, welcome. All right, Law of One. Welcome, welcome. I thought I'd throw in the star date this week. I don't do that, but for those of you out there who are Trekkies around the world, you guys will get a kick out of that. That's the GMT -7 current star date. I thought about doing that and putting that in the title to the show so that everybody knows what the date is. Only the people that are Star Trek fans would be doing that. Penny, welcome. Denise, welcome. Chandra, welcome. Anybody that doesn't say anything in the chat, all I see is numbers. I don't know who's here, so say hello if you're here. Unless you're on Instagram, then I won't come into this chat. And I'll have to look over there like Collectible Design popped in. Welcome. Collectible Design, little shout out to you guys over there on Instagram. You guys popped in to see what was going on. Today's the Law of One. We're going to be doing session 66, I believe. We're on today out of the 106 sessions of the Law of One. This is the 118th, around 118th week of talking about the Law of One for the second time. First time we already finished that, and that took me 22 weeks to do, or 22 months to do. 2 years and No, it's more than 22 months. It took me 2 years and 2 months to do this, to last time. So this time we're close to that now. I'm not exactly sure what 118 weeks is. 52 and 52, right? So we're past 2 years, so we're getting close to that, right? So welcome, everybody. Let me get back over here to the studio so that I can see you guys over here, right? So share this out. I shared it to a bunch of places while we were waiting for the music to end there. If you guys are listening around the world on the MP3 broadcast, you don't see any of the visuals. Those of you watching on either Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, you have the MP4 broadcast, and you can see the visuals from both of those videos that I played there at the beginning, my opening song, and then the one for the Orion Coalition of Light that we also are representative of. Not just myself, but some of the people in this audience. Okay, so today, I think it's, like I said, it's 66, I think, is the session. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. There's nothing else really going on in the world right now. I was like a few seconds late going live because I was watching the tree lighting in New York, not the one in Times Square, but the one from Rockefeller Plaza or across the street from it. Whatever, Fox had theirs that they were lighting. And they're all, because all the news agencies are right there on Rockefeller Plaza, in Rockefeller Plaza, across the street from each other, right? All of them are like CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and all of them. People don't know that, but they can walk out the door, walk across the street, and go into the other studio. They're literally across a private street that they have. It's there, not a joke. It's literally that way. So they were out there lighting their tree today, and I was watching the end of that just before I switched the channel for my mom to watch something else. I always love watching any Christmas tree lighting. I'll watch it no matter where it is in the world. If I can tune in, I do. And if I can tune in live, I will. And if not, I'll DVR it. Okay. Reese, welcome. So Cassie, welcome. I had to look down to see who was in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. I believe we're on session 66. I'd have to look at my phone. I have the right one up. I know I have the right one, so I think it's 66. So we finished. I'm not even sure what they're going to talk about in this session. I didn't read ahead. I was too busy running around doing stuff today. It's raining here in California currently. We have one of those atmospheric rivers. Weird that my entire life of listening to the news anywhere, I never heard of an atmospheric river until 2 years ago, when all of a sudden they started calling these storms, a storm that was coming in, an atmospheric river. And now there's a storm alert that is running on the screen constantly for normal rain and normal wind in November. It's not like we have monsoon rain here happening anywhere in the state of California. It's not like we're flooding everywhere. It's not like the storm is so intense that we have hurricane force winds, which right now they're claiming that we're going to have gusts up to 35 miles an hour. And the entire day I've had the windows open looking outside just to see how bad the wind was. And currently the wind is moving right now at about a half a mile an hour out of the north. And so there's an alert on television telling us how dangerous this atmospheric river is that's coming in from the north. It's coming down from the north and kind of moving east across. So it's coming from the northeast going across the state of California currently. Although it was windier in other places down south, but still not anything that is not out of the ordinary for my entire life growing up in the state of California. In Northern California, the San Francisco Bay Area, now in the Sacramento area, except for the time that I was gone in Arizona, and that, the storms there were insane, right? I mean, literally monsoon rain makes anything I've ever witnessed in the state of California, anywhere in the state of California, pale in comparison. And over there, people are walking around in tank tops and T-shirts and flip-flops when that happens. Not a joke. Okay. So the rain there is insane. The ground rumbles from the thunder. Literally, your windows shake on your house. Your whole house shakes. Animals hide under things. And that went on. I remember one night it was so bad, I had to go out in the living room because we had 4 cats and they were scared to death. And I had a wife and a mother-in-law who were scared to death. So we had to all huddle in the same room together so that they would be calm. And I had to tell them they were going to be okay and repeat that until they finally fell asleep. But the thunder was pretty scary, right? It was pretty bad. I got caught in the worst sandstorm in history in Arizona in my van at night, about 9 o'clock at night, in my van. And it was so scary. I actually said out loud, I was praying, but out loud came out of my mouth without me being aware that I was going to say it. I actually went, "Oh God," twice, 2 different times. It was pretty bad. It was pretty scary. And then when it was over, then the rain started because that was just the sandstorm part. And then the lightning, the thunder, and the rain poured down, and I was in a flood zone. So everybody was around me. We were all trying to get out of that flood zone, and it flooded. So it was a good thing we got out of there. So, they're over here, atmospheric river, look out, everybody hunker down. It's crazy. It's going to kill us all. And it's sprinkling outside. And if I went at the camera, that's more wind than I've seen all day long outside. And they need to have an alert running on the screen constantly and interrupting every 20 minutes to give us the weather report. It's not like they're trying to sensationalize the weather or anything. They're just trying to sensationalize the weather. Okay. So, Bo, welcome. I didn't see who else was here. I just happened to put on my glasses and look down. Did I say hi to Reese? I did. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do a sound check. I'm going to play the Law of One, and then we'll just go ahead and get started with that. And like I said, I'm not even sure what this session is going to cover. We covered a lot of talking about wanderers last week and the week before, and then went into, and Dawn kept bebopping back and forth between the pyramids and the King's Chamber and the pyramid because that had to do with aligning of the chakras. If you missed that, you might want to go back and take a look at that because those were actually pretty good. So if there's anybody that's over on YouTube, on Instagram, if you say something in the chat, it won't come into my studio, but YouTube and Facebook, pardon me, both do come into the studio. I haven't figured out why the Instagram doesn't filter into the studio, but I'm probably going to fire StreamYard anyway at some point and go with Zoom and go live with Zoom. So we'll see what happens there, right? Because then people can just hop in. So we'll see how that works out. But I haven't done it yet, but I can go live because I have a professional account. Okay, so let me go ahead and press play on this here, and we'll do a sound check. You guys let me know if you can hear it okay, all right?
August 12th, 1981. 66.0 Ra. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. 66.1 Questioner. Could you give me an indication of the instrument's condition?
Right, I did see that, Denise. I saw that you said hi too. I apologize that I didn't say hi back, but I saw that you said hi over there, and then I saw that collectible design popped in. They didn't say anything though. Oh no, right? Oh, Reese, that's you. I didn't realize that. Collectible Design is Reese. Okay, that's his company. I didn't realize that was you, bro. So Reese just said, laugh out loud, it's Reese. I just realized that the link took me to the Instagrams. That's funny, brother. So I didn't realize that was good. I think I'm following you. I didn't realize that was you in your company. That's hilarious, bro. So Reese popped in on Instagram and it popped up because I follow him. And so I said hi to him and he was like, it's Reese. I don't know how I ended up on here. The link took me here instead of over there. Weird. Right. So sometimes that happens, right? That's funny, bro. Okay. Sounds good, right? Thank you, Bo. I don't think anybody else answered, but Bo did. Everybody's trying to tag people. Get them in here. Where are they, Cassie? Get them in here. Where are they, Denise? Tag them. Get them in here. They're late. Okay. It's Friday. We're going into the holidays. I won't be doing the Wednesday Q&A on Zoom next week because it's the day before Thanksgiving. My sister's coming up on that day, on Wednesday. So I'm going to be cooking Thanksgiving for that Wednesday for her to be here to have Thanksgiving with our mom. And then she's going to go back down to her house and have Thanksgiving with her kids on Thanksgiving. So Wednesday I'll be busy and I won't be doing the Q&A. I should be back on Friday, even though probably most of you won't be tuning in. I may take Friday off because if you're in America, I'll probably be on just in case, because I know a lot of you are in Australia and you guys don't celebrate Thanksgiving. That's an American holiday. But I don't know if you guys celebrate the day after, which in the United States is a very big day for retail. They call it Black Friday because all retail companies, people don't know this. I was in retail manager for 15 years. All of the retail companies almost exclusively don't turn a profit from January until November. And then their profit is the holidays is where they make all their money. So they start getting closed because of Halloween and they don't really make money until people start buying stuff for the holidays. So they call Friday Black Friday in America because that's when if things go right in a retail company, you actually turn a profit after that day and all the sales that go on starting on Friday and go through the weekend. So because of that, almost everybody in the United States is out shopping on Black Friday and then Saturday and Sunday. So for that weekend, for podcasters, most podcasters are not on unless they're broadcasting to the world, which I do, because America's not going to tune in because they're getting up more important things to do, like go out and spend all their money and run their credit cards up and put themselves thousands of dollars in debt for stuff that they're going to end up returning in a month anyways, which is hilarious. Most of it gets returned, not all of it. But most of it, that's why companies started charging people restocking fees because people would go and, like for the Super Bowl, they would have everybody would go and buy a widescreen television, a huge, big television, and then they would return it after the Super Bowl so they could have a party. And so companies got wind that that's what people were doing, and they started charging you 25%. So basically rent, because people would do the same thing with outfits, suits, and the whole shebang, women with dresses, shoes, the whole thing. People would go out and put it all on their credit card and come back and return it and say, I didn't like it. Size wasn't right. It wasn't what I was looking for. And then, people with getting presents for people wouldn't like what they got, or people would get them the same thing. So they started asking people to give them the receipt and they'd go return it and get something that they wanted. So corporations started trying not to lose any more money. So they started making everybody pay for it. If you're going to return it, you have to pay a stocking fee because they know you're buying it to wear it, to use it for one day or one holiday, and then you're returning it. So they're basically charging you rent, and then they have to sell it at a discount, right? I know that because, like I said, I was retail manager for close to 15 years. Okay, so let's go ahead and get going. So I'll probably be on the air next Friday. I don't see any reason why not, because I don't go shopping. The one thing that retail associates, anybody that's working in retail for any length of time, you don't run out and shop when everybody else does because you're usually working it. So I don't go out and shop on days like that when everybody's trying to kill one another, running around fighting over a Teletubby or some other thing that they've gone crazy over. We call it mass hysteria because something will go viral and everybody has to have one of them, and everybody's in the stores trying to buy everything that they have, which corporations do on purpose nowadays. Once they realized that they could run people, then they made only a certain amount and then told everybody they were only going to have a certain amount on that specific day. And when they were sold out, there wasn't going to be any more to drum up business to make it worth more money. And then they would, after they ran up all their business for everybody running in and buying it, then 2 weeks later, they would drop a whole bunch, or 3 weeks later, they would drop a whole bunch on the market anyways, but people would still run out because they wanted to have it before anybody else, like running to go and see a movie first, at the midnight movie, so that you could say, I saw it before you did. Who cares? I still saw it. I went to sleep and I didn't miss any sleep. And I got up at 8 o'clock in the morning and went out and had breakfast and hung out with my friends and then went to the theater and watched the movie at 11. And I saw it just as much as you. While you were still sleeping and didn't get to gloat over it with everybody because you were up until 3 in the morning, I was able to go and see the movie and then tell everybody about it. Right? But I used to do the same thing. I worked for a movie theater when I was 18 to 21. I worked for movie theaters, and we used to go and watch the movie. We used to get in and watch them for free because they had to run the movie when they would get it before they could. They had to screen it to make sure there wasn't any problems, and if they had to patch anything or if it broke or whatever. So they had to actually run it. So the projectionists and the managers would sit there and watch the movie anyways. So what they started doing was they started allowing the employees, and that's kind of one of the perks when you work at a movie theater. The night before the movie hits the market for the world to see in the United States, all employees, you unless they stop doing that. When I was doing that, and that was 20 years ago, 30 years ago now, we would go and we close the store, clean the whole store, put everything away. And then employees that weren't even working that day would show up and we'd let them in. And then we'd all go into the movie theater and we'd sit down and we'd get popcorn and soda and candy and stuff, but we had to pay for it. So we'd all buy it before the registers were closed and they had to upload the sales. We didn't get anything for free. And then we would go in and we would sit down and the movie would start. And we would watch the movie the night before, and then we'd all go home. We already saw it. And the next day when the movie came out for the rest of the world, we saw the movie the night before, and they did it all across the United States. So if you've ever worked for a movie theater, you know what I'm talking about. Jamie, welcome. I don't know who else was here that I didn't say. Penny, did I say hi to you? I don't think I did. Penny, welcome. I don't know if I said hi to you. I apologize if I didn't. So if you say something in the chat, I know you're here, and then I'll say hello. If you don't say anything in the chat, I don't know you're here. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue with the law of one instead of me burning time here talking, right? Here we go.
Ra, I am Ra. The vital energies are somewhat depleted at this time, but not seriously so. The physical energy level is extremely low. Otherwise, it is as previously stated. 66.2 Questioner, is there anything that we can do, staying within the first distortion?
We used to do that. Denise said I would pay for one movie and then sneak in and see one more. We used to do that before I was working at a movie theater. And even when we were working for a movie theater, we would sneak into our own movie theaters, but not the one we worked at, but the company that we worked at. We'd go to one of our sister theaters and sneak in there. We used to go into the drive-in because we had a lot of drive-ins out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. When I was a kid, there was one on every block. And by the time I was working for a movie theater, that movie theater owned about 10 drive-in theaters in the San Francisco Bay Area. And there was one in the town that I grew up in, the city I lived in. So we would go before we worked for it. And even after we worked for it, when we were in our 20s, we would still sneak in because you'd go in and you'd pay for a car. And the people would count the people. It used to be however many people you had in the car. So people showed up and there would be like a clown car with like 20 people in it. And then they started realizing that people were packing all kinds of people in the cars, and they started charging by the head. So you would get a flat fee plus additional people. So we went into a van and we all laid down in the back of the van and laid like this and like this on top of each other. And they made a bed out of us and literally made up the bed with sheets and blankets on top of us with pillows and made it look like a bed in the back of the van. And it was like 8 of us people laying on top of each other, laying down, driving into the movie theater or into the drive-in theater. And then once we got in there, we stayed hidden until they went and parked. And then they turned the van sideways and opened up the double doors. And we all jumped up and all sat and looked out of the van. So we never got caught. We used to also take the marquee letters. We did that during one of the Michael Myers, one of the Jason movies or the Halloween movies. It was one with Mike Myers, so that's not Halloween. That's the Jason movies, and I forgot what that was called. Friday the 13th, and it was one of the like Friday the 13th, like part 4 or something like that. And we went and got all the marquee numbers, and we put on a mask like his, and had a fake knife, and we would go over there, and whenever they would kill somebody, we would hold up the marquee numbers and stand up on top of the cars, and they were the big marquee numbers that were like 3 feet by 3 feet, and we'd go 1, 1, and we'd all run around cheering for them, and the crowd just became unglued. They thought it was hilarious that we would run around and have a marquee number to count how many bodies, how many people that he killed during the movie. We were all cheering for him. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It was stupid. Right? It was stupid, but it was fun. Sorry for me reminiscing. You know, you guys are here for the law of one and spirituality, so let's go ahead and continue instead of messing with that. Woo Riders, welcome. Woo Riders DGs over on YouTube, welcome. Okay, so let's continue with the law of one. Right? I apologize for reminiscing about sneaking into movie theaters and having fun, but I used to do the same thing, Denise. I'd go to a movie, and then I would go out and I'd pick another movie. My brother and I used to do that. We'd walk out and act like we're going to the bathroom and skirt into another movie theater, and then they started having to come in and check tickets to make sure nobody was doing that. After a while, it was harder to do. All right, let's continue.
To seek aid from the Confederation in order to alleviate the instrument's physical problems. Ra, I am Ra. No. 66.3 Questioner, can you tell me the most appropriate method for attempting to alleviate the instrument's physical problems? Ra, I am Ra. The basic material has been covered before concerning the nurturing of this instrument. We recapitulate: the exercise according to ability, not to exceed appropriate parameters, the nutrition, the social intercourse with companions, the sexual activity in green ray or above, and in general, the sharing of the distortions of this group's individual experiences in an helpful, loving manner. These things are being accomplished with what we consider great harmony, given the density in which you dance. The specific attention and activities with which those with physical complex distortions may alleviate these distortions are known to this instrument. Finally, it is well for this instrument to continue the practices it has lately begun. 66.4 Questioner, which practices are those? Ra, I am Ra. These practices concern exercises which we have outlined previously. We may say that the variety of experiences which this entity seeks is helpful, as we have said before, but as this instrument works in these practices, the distortion seems less mandatory. 66.5 Questioner, I would like to investigate the mechanism of healing using the crystallized healer. I am going to make a statement, and I would appreciate it if you would correct my thinking. It seems to me that once the healer has become properly balanced and unblocked with respect to energy centers, it is possible for him to act in some way as a collector and focuser of light, the same way that, or analogous to the way that a pyramid works, taking or collecting light through the left hand and emitting it through the right. This then, somehow, penetrating the first and seventh chakra envelope, vibratory envelope, you might say, of the body, and allowing for the realignment of energy centers of the entity to be healed. I'm quite sure that I'm not exactly correct on this, and possibly considerably off. Could you rearrange my thinking so that it makes sense? Ra, I am Ra. You are correct in your assumption that the crystallized healer is analogous to the pyramidal action of the king's chamber position. There are a few adjustments we might suggest. Firstly, the energy which is used is brought into the field complex of the healer by the outstretched hand used in a polarized sense. However, this energy circulates through the various points of energy to the base of the spine and, to a certain extent, the feet, thus coming through the main energy centers of the healer, spiraling through the feet, turning at the red energy center towards a spiral at the yellow energy center, and passing through the green energy center in a
Kundalini energy. So all energy, and I'll let him continue, or let them continue. So Dawn was contending that the energy comes in the left hand and goes out the right hand, but energy always, and a lot of people get this idea in their head that that the energy comes from the universe, comes down into their body, and some people try to manifest energy that way, but all energy, even if you're drawing it down from the universe, goes down and comes up your feet. It's always the Kundalini energy. It always goes through your feet and up into your chakras and up and then out your head, unless you're channeling like Reiki energy through your hands to come out. But even that is a tool that you're putting your hands over people, and it's still actually coming out of your head and going there. You just are pushing some of it through your arms, and you feel it there because you're focusing that as a tool. But it still comes up and comes out. I mean, it comes out of all of you anyway. So if you're putting your, lay your hands on somebody in some way that's praying or whatever, you're not just energy coming from your hands, but that's where That's where the focus is and the positiveness, and it comes out. So I'll let Ra continue. But literally, all energy when it comes into your body is drawn in from, and only you're polarized that way. It goes in from the base and goes up. All energy spirals up your spine and through your chakras. Okay, let's continue.
Microcosm of the King's Chamber energy configuration of prana, this then continuing for the third spiral through the blue energy center and being sent therefrom through the gateway back to intelligent infinity. It is from the green center that the healing prana moves into the polarized healing right hand and therefrom to the one to be healed. We may note that there are some who use the yellow ray configuration to transfer energy, and this may be done, but the effects are questionable, and with regard to the relationship between the healer, the healing energy, and the seeker, questionable due to the propensity for the seeker to continue requiring such energy transfers without any true healing taking place in the absence of the healer due to the lack of penetration of the armoring shell of which you spoke. 66.6 question.
Peter, welcome. I didn't say hello to you. I just happened to look down and saw that Bo said hi and realized that if I had my glasses on, I would have saw that you popped in and said hello. Welcome, brother. Okay, let's continue.
Now, a wanderer who has an origin from 5th or 6th density can attempt such a healing and have little or no results. This indicates to me that there is some function of the activated body, since the can you tell me what the wanderer has lost and why it is necessary for him to regain certain balances and abilities to perfect his healing ability? Ra, I am Ra. You may see the wanderer as the infant attempting to verbalize the sound complexes of your peoples. The memory.
Yes, Bo. So that when you draw the energy in, it comes in. It always comes from the base of you, up your chakra centers. So you have to remember that the crown chakra is your wisdom, and the throat chakra is your voice, and it's the knowledge and wisdom chakras. So everything goes through the heart. So everything goes to the heart. So even if you're going to transfer the energy like Reiki out your hands, it has to go all the way through the heart first, and then because of the wisdom and the voice and the thoughts, the knowledge and the wisdom, those chakras that are above, you're still going to have that help rule what's going on. But the heart chakra is where all creation comes from. So even for those people in service to self, they are ruled by the heart. That's why it's the Vesica Pisces. Right, the yin and the yang is the Vesica Pisces, right? And that center point it's actually supposed to be tilted this way so that it's up and down and it aligns with your chakras. And the heart is that center point where the light is in the dark and the dark is in the light, because the heart is the center of the universe. Your light, the light of the universe, it's the same. So the planet itself has the same center in the center, and that's why Thoth said the way to heaven or the way to God is through the center of the planets, through the center chakra, which is the heart chakra. So the Taurus, the Taurus that is the globe, which is that sphere with the hole in the center of it that goes down to a 0 point. That 0 point is where your heart chakra is. Your heart, you have those spheres around you. You have a lower sphere, an upper sphere, and then the heart chakra sphere, which makes up the Vesica Pisces. And then you have a large aura around you that is that same sphere that is over the planet. So if you watch the visuals for the second video that I played today, specifically on the intro to this show, you see that as I show it to you there, that your heart chakra is that space that it's either use it if you're in service to self, you use it for love of self, and that rules your bottom 3 chakras, and then you gain some of the wisdom and knowledge, but you can't use all of that knowledge spiritually at all, because you're living in the bottom 3 chakras. And then if you're a spiritual person who's in service to others, then you start residing from the heart into the upper, but you're supposed to balance all of the chakras either way. It's just to what, when you're living in the spiritual, you're in the upper 3 chakras and you still balance the lower 3, but that's where you're residing, and your knowledge and wisdom and caring and loving is from the heart up. And if you're in love with self, you're living in the bottom 3 chakras and it's still from the heart down, but you still, both, if you're living up in the spiritual, you still have to balance the bottom chakras. You're just not living in them, and the other way around. So that I don't know if that helps you, but that's so everything comes from the heart. So the yin and the yang is that overlay. It's a one-dimensional drawing and concept of the human psyche or the human condition, and everything else in the universe is ruled the same way, because everything has the same chakras. That's why when it rains and the sun's out, you can look up and you see the rainbow in the sky. That's because the water is refracting the light, and the light takes on the manifestation of the rainbows, which are exactly in line with you down here on Earth. It's only in the reverse because you're down here. So if you look up at a rainbow, you're going to see the purple or the violet, and then it's going to go up to the red because you're looking at it from down here. Okay, so that's the as above, so below. It's the mirror image of you down here with the red at your base, and the indigo in the throat, and the violet up above the crown chakra, or at the crown chakra. So that it's actually the mirror image, right? And that's where they get that idea that God's reaching down to us, and we're supposed to reach up to God. That 51%, because it's mirroring each other. That's the as above, so below, or the as below, so above, right? So that's why you see it and perceive it that way down here. Okay, and then Cassie had said something, right? I wanted to see what Cassie said because she wrote a lot here. She said, yeah, that's the way I personally felt the energy from feet upward, and then open my crown chakra to let the light in there too. And let me put it up on the screen so you guys can also see it. But I'll read it for those of you listening on the MP3 broadcast. The chakra, and let the light in too, and for the two to blend together upwards and downwards at the same time. Yeah, that's where you get the balance when you do that. And everything is centered around the heart, whether you're in service to self or in service to others. The heart chakra is the focal point of yourself. And that's why it wasn't actually called the heart. Originally, the Greeks called the heart our actual functioning heart, the life pump or something similar to that. Don't quote me on that. What they called the heart was your third eye. That was what they called the heart. And somewhere along the lines of time, we transferred the heart being your pineal gland in your third eye to the physical body, the physical heart that pumps within your chest, and then we now call that the heart. And I can see why, rightly so, because that's where your soul doesn't reside in your head. Your soul resides in the heart, no matter what, whether you're in service to self or service to others. But because this is where the brain is, everybody's associated that with a thinking, and therefore I must be up here. Your third eye is there. So even when you're seeing not through these eyes, and when you're seeing through these eyes, you're not seeing from your heart, you're seeing from here, but that's in the physical, right? So spiritually, you're either seeing from your heart because you love the world, or you're seeing from the heart because you love yourself. So either way, you're actually coming from a place that is your heart and the energy of your heart. So people don't realize that. Paulie, welcome. So let me continue and let Ra continue to talk. But you have to realize that all energy comes from, it comes into your body from your feet and then goes up. It's the Kundalini and the Kunda buffer, the masculine and feminine energies, which is the Celtic knotwork that the Vikings and the Celts have in their drawings. And that's the dual energies of masculine and feminine, the Kundalini, Kunda buffer energy, Kundalini being masculine, Kunda buffer being feminine. And that's those two energies. That's literally the knotwork that they show that everything is intertwined with. And they put that in all of their literature. All right, let's continue.
Free of the ability to
Speaking of that, I wanted to talk about somebody was posting today about Constantine creating the religion of Jesus, and stating, which is not exactly accurate, but stating that Constantine never converted to Christianity, even though he created Christianity, and that Christianity was created by Constantine to control the Jews. Weirdly, this person, I didn't get into it with them. I wanted to, but I just went, okay, I could jump in here and give them actual truths that are, from a theological standpoint, even though in a historical standpoint, that's kind of accurate. but they claim that Constantine never converted. And they say that 300 years after, this guy says 300 years after Constantine died, one of the popes claimed that he's claiming that one of the popes then baptized him, though he's dead. I don't know how. And the spirit's already gone, that a pope went through the ritual to baptize Constantine and called him a Christian because he was the one that created Christianity. And literally, and then I wanted to jump in there, but I didn't. And then I was thinking, the people that are claiming mostly that that the Romans created Jesus are Jewish people. They're Hasidic Jews who claim that Jesus, because they've always said that Jesus wasn't legitimate, which is weird, because here's the thing. So if that's the case, then why is it that when people talk about Jesus, or when, like, say, the movie of the Last Temptation of Christ came out, why is it that the official church, that is the Hebrew church, did not come out and state to the world that's not a real religion? They came out and said, you guys need to realize that it wasn't all of the Jews or all of the Hebrew religious scholars who rejected Jesus. It was only the Pharisees, and only a few of the Pharisees, something like 15 or 16 of the Pharisees, that rebuked Jesus and were responsible for his death. The very people who claim Jesus never existed and that the Romans just created it are more concerned with people thinking that all the Jewish faith did that, instead of saying, okay, you guys need to get over yourselves because Jesus isn't even real. It never happened. So don't get mad at us because you think that the Hebrews were responsible for his death, because we didn't have anything to do with it, because it was all a lie. Now, let's just stop all of that. And this is what I wanted to answer that person with. So if Constantine created Jesus and Jesus never existed prior to that, and he was doing it as a Roman emperor who was ruling over the Jews, was creating a religion for Jewish people, and first of all, to what end? Is he trying to ruin the Hebrew race and the Hebrew religion and get everybody to convert to Christianity so that he can control them? One. Two, I'm supposed to believe that all the humans that were alive at the time didn't notice that there was no talk of Jesus prior to, and that there was nothing that went on, a few hundred years before that, 1,000 years before that, and that all the Jewish people were just listening to that and going, what? I missed that. There's a Savior, and it already came, and his name is Jesus? Well, that's it. We have to get rid of this religion and follow the Hebrew religion. Okay? So the only way that story works is that we have to believe that most of the Hebrews and everybody else on the planet were so stupid that they fell for that. If I were to try that today, and people will say, well, because we're a lot smarter than they were. Anybody that knows anything about history, including theology, and the way the humans have evolved, the truth is there is nothing anywhere in any empirical fact that will say to you that the people that are alive today are any smarter or a higher education or a higher IQ than anyone else that has ever lived on the face of the earth. The only difference is we have technology, and a kind of technology that they did not have. That is it. Because the politics of today is exactly the politics of when Jesus was alive 2,000 years ago. It's exactly the politics that went on 5,000 years ago when Moses was alive and when the Romans were not even a thing yet, right? And the Egyptians ruled everything. Politics has not changed one iota when you read history. It is identical. The only way that could happen is that the people are still falling for the same things they fell for thousands of years ago, which would suggest that if somebody were able to create a religion, say, and make up an entire scenario and story that, you know what just happened? Do you know what just happened? There was a guy who was born who died at 33 years of age, and he died for everybody's sins, and his name was Jesus Christ. If somebody wrote that story today, the odds of anyone believing that would be the exact odds that anybody would believe that made up story 2,000 years ago. None. Okay? Because the human psyche is identical today as it was then. The only difference is we have computers now. That's it. We have cars made of metal instead of running around with horses pulling our chariots. We have now put the motor in there, which we still equate to how many horses are driving that car. When you buy a car, it has 150 horsepower, which if you were to go back in time, you would have 150 horses in front of you, and they'd be able to run fast enough or pull everything with their strength. So we still use the analogy of how many horses. We haven't even upgraded that thought process. The only thing we've done is taken the horses out of the equation, and we have a piece of metal that is doing the same job, but we still refer to it the exact same way. All of our laws are still maritime laws that are more than 5,000 years old. We haven't even upgraded those. So what makes you think that we're so much smarter that we wouldn't fall for a religion today? Because we wouldn't. Everyone's like, we wouldn't fall for that today. They wouldn't fall for that back then either, because they're no stupider than we are today. They're no smarter than we are today. The difference is we have a little bit better of an education because we have more schooling than they had back then. But they had a type of schooling back then that we don't have today. So we have a type of schooling today that they didn't have back then. They learned how to cultivate, how to plant crops, how to hunt, how to fish, how to make clothing, how to cure leather, make all these goods that they used back then. No one is taught any of those skills today. It is less than 1% of the population. So we're learning a thing that less than 1% of their population was learning, and they were learning a thing that less than 1% of our population is currently learning. That doesn't make us more intelligent. That just makes us more arrogant, because we have television and computers that can communicate around the world. So the reason I tell you this is you need to get into your head. We're not the greatest generation that ever lived. We are exactly the same, if you read history, as what went on back then. Read the stories that were written by people. Let's look at Shakespeare. William Shakespeare lived 500 years ago or 1,500 years ago, right? It was in the 1500s, I think, when Shakespeare lived. Look at the stories that he wrote. They're the exact same stories that you see in movies today. They just have different names. They're the same story. So if we're smarter, if we've evolved so much past the way they were then, why are we still writing the exact same scenarios down with the same stories? Because otherwise people wouldn't want to watch Shakespeare. People don't watch it now because they don't understand the language. That's it. You translate Shakespeare into a modern movie and change the words so that it is today. People don't even know it's Shakespeare, and they watch it and they go, that was a great movie. I see them do it all the time. And they do that, and it's updated for now. I've watched them do Hamlet that way. I've watched them do many other Shakespearean stories and many older stories that I know existed, and they put it into today's terms and change the verbiage to today. And people go, that was a great movie. And I'm like, that story was written 5,000 years ago. And people go, what? I'm like, look it up. All they did was instead of making it a period piece, they made it today, and they just changed the words so that you would understand them today. But it's the exact same storyline. Everything that you see there, if you read like Homer's Iliad, and then you look at like, you know, the Troy today, the story of Troy, the language that they use in that movie that Brad Pitt was in is modern today. They didn't talk like that back then. They talked completely different back then than they do now. But the story is telling you the exact same story. They just updated the verbiage so that you would understand it today and like it. If they said it to you the way that they said it, first of all, it'd be in Greek. But if they translated the Greek, you wouldn't understand the verbiage and the way they spoke 5,000 years ago when there was that thing going on with Troy. Okay. So you wouldn't understand what they were saying and their points of reference because you have no reference. But they translated it all into modern verbiage so that you have a reference point. That's why they do that with the Bible as well. You have the New International Version of the Bible, which is the now into modern English of today in the way that people understand that. And so when you read the Bible, it makes sense to you. So if you pick up a King James Version of the Bible and you read that, you don't understand the references, what they're saying, because that's 1,500 years old. Do you see? That's the only thing that's changed. The story is identical. The difference is the way that the words are being used because of how you understand them. So you need to understand that about everything in history, that we don't see the world how it is. We see the world how we are. We don't see reality for what it actually is. We see reality through our lenses of how we are personally. So you also don't see yourself the way other people see you. You see yourself the way you think other people see you. But until you talk to other people and have them tell you what they see, or until you film yourself and play yourself back to yourself and watch how you talk and how you walk and how you act, but even then you're aware that you're filming, so you're going to be on your best behavior for yourself because you know you're going to look at it later. So unless you talk to people and have them be honest with you on what they think you're trying to say to them, then you think something completely different about yourself until you realize that people don't see you the way you see you. And so you're like, I'm the greatest guy on the face of the earth. Other people are like, that guy's an asshole. You need to realize those things. That's what being objective means with yourself instead of being subjective. Subjective is all emotion and your attitude and your belief. Being objective is actually being clinical and investigating yourself and being honest with yourself enough to say, I'm maybe not a nice guy. And admit that to yourself. I brought that up last week when I was talking about a buddy of mine who had who was an HVAC guy, and I walked over to his van because we were meeting at a job site, and I looked in his passenger window and I was talking to him, and I noticed that the tape to his dashboard right in front of him was a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that said, "Don't be a dick." And I laughed and said, "What's that for?" And he said, sometimes I'm a dick, and I need to remind myself, last thing I see when I get out of the van is, don't be a dick. That way I don't piss somebody off, because this is what I do for a living, and I'm representing myself because he was a contractor. I'm representing myself, and if people think I'm an asshole or I'm a dick, they may not want me to come back and work for them, and they'll tell their friends not to hire me. I don't need that happening to me because I'm trying to make money. I'm making a living at this. So that was a person who was aware that he was not perfect and that sometimes he came across in a way that offended some people. And so he decided that he wanted to make sure that he didn't do that. Okay, I know that when I speak too fast for a lot of people. I'm not linear minded, so that drives people who are linear crazy and they can't handle the way I speak and where I go when I talk. They have a hard time following me because I move too fast. I'm aware of that. I know that. That's why I talk in parables when I talk, and I give you many examples of what I'm talking about. Some of you don't even realize they do that. That's why most orators throughout history talk in parables, because they know that people learn in different ways, and they're aware that if you say something only one way and then go, let's move on, not everybody out there listening is going to actually get what you just said. And it's not their fault. It's just the way they learn. All of us learn individually. There's 7 different ways that the human genome learns, and all of us are one or two or a cross between a couple of those 7. And people have identified those clinically throughout history, and they're aware of that. So we teach this in leadership. When I was in management school as in my early 20s, they were teaching it back then. It's not what you say, it's what they hear. You have to realize that. So always assume that. And then you have to also learn people, and you have to know how to lead them. So if you're going to lead people, you have to understand how people learn. And there are certain specific ways that people learn, even when there is something where you're going to have them do something for you in a physical way, build a house or something. Different people learn a different way, and they also are comfortable doing something, a task, in a certain way. Some people, you can hand them a piece of paper that tells them how to do it, and they'll just read it and do it. Others, you have to show them what you're talking about, and then they'll get it. Other people, you have to give them images of how to do it, and they can do it. Some people, you can just say, go over there and do it, and they'll already have an idea of how to do that. Those are just 4 of the 7 ways that people learn. So all of these things apply across the board. And so I know that a lot of times people get frustrated with me when I'm talking, because I stop and I will go on for 20 minutes. In doing so, I'm trying to cover as many of those areas that I can, so that anybody around the world that's listening or watching, that I'll pretty much get everybody on board with the point that I'm trying to make. I lose some people because they're like, he rambles, I'm out of here. Linear-minded people can't stand me. What they need is somebody who's linear to teach them. And that's where I don't get mad if people leave, because you have to go to where you're going to be able to be taught. And if you're linear-minded, I'm the wrong guy. You're going to think I'm just insanely jumping around everywhere, because I'm not methodically moving from one place to another. And just so you guys know out there in the world, linear-minded people drive me just as crazy as I drive them crazy, because I have to wait for linear-minded people to catch up, because they have to go step by step by step by step. That's what linear means. So they literally will only go, Terrence Howard, talking to a friend of Joe Rogan's, who is a scientist, had the same issue. Joe Rogan, his friend, is very linear-minded, drives me crazy. And I'll sit there and he'll talk and talk and talk and talk. And I'm like already 100 steps ahead of him. Terrence Howard moves like I do, very non-linear. And they were driving each other nuts for a 3-hour show when they were trying to talk to each other, because they're so different in the way their brains are wired, that Terrence Howard has to sit there and stop and wait while the guy who's linear goes through all the steps to get to his next point. And it would drive him crazy if you don't let him do that. So what happens is, either the person who is non-linear just goes, figure your shit out and go away, or they have to become patient, because the linear person will not deviate from the linear-minded ideology that they have. They cannot. They have a one-track mind, and that is where they go, and that is all that they can do. You cannot get them out of that mode. Whereas a person who's non-linear can stop and have the patience to wait for somebody to drive them crazy, but they'll be able to do it. So it behooves those of us who are not linear to slow down and wait for the linear-minded people to catch up, right? Right? Joanne says, it's great how they mention the Holy Spirit, but can't get their heads around spirituality. Also, the angel that told Mary about the coming, but are still frightened of those who have a gift, right? Yeah, it's same. Yeah, I agree with that. Same thing. Their own prophecy in the Hebrews, getting back to that, foretold of this specific time, specific date, and the specific person who was going to show up. And when that happened, not all of the Jews, but a bunch of them were like, he's not that. Well, okay, so your own prophecy says that it's going to happen today. So who else is here? So where do you have your idea of who God sent today? And they were like, no, God just hasn't sent anybody yet. But the prophecy says it's going to be today, not tomorrow, not anytime after this, today. And here's the guy, but you don't like him. So you're saying no, right? It's just like they change things because it scares people, like the translation of in nomine Patri, Filii, Spiritus Sancti. Okay, that's Latin. That means in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. Okay, not Holy Spirit. Even though Spirit's a more proper term, today they've translated it as spirit, because our reference is spirit is something different than a ghost. A ghost is a disembodied spirit of a person who still has that personality of the person in our minds today by our definitions. When that Latin phrase was being used, 1,500 years ago, almost 2,000 years ago now, those words meant that same concept. It didn't mean ghost, disembodied spirit roaming free that is still the persona of the dead person. It meant spirit, right? So when they translated it from the, say, the King James Version or the Latin to English, in the modern version of the new, new English translation, they changed the word to spirit, but it's not what it meant. It's what it meant. So it's the spirit of the translation, but it's not the actual verbiage, the actual word. A spiritu to us is spirit, because that's where our word comes from. Okay, but those two concepts were the same. The truth is, if you go back far enough into the Greek, it would have been the pneuma, because that means the breath of God. That means the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. Do you see? So it depends on where you're translating it. And then if you say pneuma today and then translate that word, then they have to give you the concept, because it doesn't necessarily mean just Holy Spirit, but it means the breath of God, the life force of God. Well, that's what the Holy Spirit is, the life force of God. So most words are concepts. Even today in the English language, they're concepts. And the words that you put around that word tells you what that concept is that you're using, what the context of that concept that you're now using for as a definition. People don't realize that, because you have whatever language is your first language, you're used to it because you've been speaking it your whole life. So you automatically click into the understanding of what concept you're using when you do it, and you do it so often that you don't realize that you are. And I always give that example when somebody says, no, we don't do that. And I'm like, then give me the definition of the word run. Look it up in the dictionary. There's like 8 pages for in the dictionary for the word run, and all the different definitions of what that word means, because we use that word for everything, right? There's many words in our language that we use that way, but the context of where we're putting that word into a sentence with the words in front of it and behind it tell us which version of the word run we are referring to here. And we translate that to ourselves instantly and know that definitely. There's a comedian that was talking about the word shit coming to America and learning the word shit. And he said, and I realized when I figured it out that I don't know shit. And it's hilarious to see him talk about that, because everyone else's shit is bad, but my shit's good. And he's just talking about it. If I give you shit, or if I'm taking shit. So the context of the word shit alone, with all the concepts of what that word means in English, to him, he found funny, and he wrote a comedy skit about it. And I passed it on to some of you, and it's actually hilarious when you think about it, right? So you have to realize the context, and this is my point. That's my allegory, right? The context of what when I was in philosophy, the very first thing that we were being taught in Philosophy 101, if you've ever taken it in college, is the teacher, if he's a good teacher. I had a monk teaching me. I really enjoyed his style too, but maybe because I'm religious and that I am a minister in 4 different religions. At the time, I was only a minister in 2, so maybe I was a little partial to the monk teaching. However, teaching you that if you truly want to understand, say, classical or philosophical thought by Socrates, Aristotle, and the like, you have to learn the history of the person, when they spoke, what race they were, where they were on the face of the earth, to actually truly understand what it is that they were saying and what motivated them to say what they did. Otherwise, they're just words without meaning. And you have to realize, where did they come from, and why did they write them, and what did it mean to them, and did it mean more to them than it meant to us today? To fully understand philosophical thought. Well, in theology, you're taught the same way. To actually understand a religion, you have to look at the very people. So you become a historian and a linguist on top of everything else, and an archaeologist on top of everything else, to truly understand what somebody wrote and when they wrote it, and what it meant to the people at the time that they wrote it for, and who were they designing it for? So when you look at religion and you see the Viking religion as opposed to the Greek religion, as opposed to the Hebrew religion, and when you're a theologian and you look at that and you separate that, you identify who was written, when was it written, for whom was it written, why, and that helps you to understand something in a different way. So when you're learning about spirituality, you realize that they're saying the same things. They're saying the same thing, but they're saying it for a different people in a different culture. And when people are talking about these religions and how they're not real, and they say that was made up, I always jump into, you do realize that even if you go back to the Mesopotamian scroll, the word Anu that everybody is calling the Anunnaki, that word Anu is not Mesopotamian. That word Anu is Akkadian, which is Greek, which was the neighboring country of Arcadia, which was next door, and they had like a 1,000-mile border. And that was a Greek god called Anu. And when Zecharia Sitchin was translating it, he knew that. And so when he saw the word Anunnaki, he assumed that they were talking about the god Anu coming down to earth. Okay, so here's a group of people that everyone claims is the oldest scroll in the world, and the Anunnaki comes out of that scroll, and the word Anu, referring to a god, is not Mesopotamian, it's actually Greek. So if it's Greek, that means that the Mesopotamians aren't the writers of that document, because they borrowed a Greek god and put it into their pantheon. So did they invent that and borrow the Greek god, or did they get that from the Greeks? The truth is, if you look at it, they got that story from the Greeks. Okay, so when you go to the Greeks, they got that story from the Egyptians, but what they do, and as a theologian, you know this, historical theologian, you realize that if somebody picks up a scroll and they get it from Egypt, but they're over in the north, they will change the names of the gods and goddesses to fit the gods and goddesses they have in their city and keep the same story. So that's where you get people saying, well, everybody's just copying homework from everybody else, right? And that we have to find the older scroll because the oldest one is going to be the one that was written. Well, every time we do that, we keep going backwards in time. And we don't find anything, and nobody focuses on what is it that they're all saying then. If the gods are, the names of the gods and goddesses are changing, but the story's the same, why are we not paying attention to the story? Why are we so obsessed with who wrote it first and where it came from when the stories are the same? And I would charge anybody that knows anything about religion to look that up, because you'll find that the Jesus story is not the first time that was written, nor is it the first time that it happened. It happened 11 other times prior to that on the earth with different names. And they changed that. So when people say, well, the Romans just invented Jesus, but the story never changed. And a lot of other things, it changed. So if they change the name of the gods and the goddesses, what else are they changing in these other religions? As a theologian, you see those differences, but you also learn what was the same, and you trace those things. The one story that has never changed, other than the name of the person who was the savior, is the Jesus story. So if the Romans made it up, why didn't they embellish in any way any other parts of the story? Because no one else did. And that story happened in 11 different places on earth, not all in the Hebrew place 11 times, but 11 different countries around the world for at least going back almost 10,000 years. And none of the story changed except for the name of the individual and the time and place where it took place. Everything else is identical. That doesn't happen in history at all, anywhere, naturally. Okay, let's continue. There's my theological discussion for the day. Celeste, welcome. Let's continue here.
Communicate is within the infant's undeveloped mind complex, but the ability to practice or manifest this, called speech, is not immediately forthcoming due to the limitations of the mind/body/spirit complex it has chosen to be a part of in this experience. So it is with the wanderer which, remembering the ease with which adjustments can be made in the home density, yet still, having entered third density, cannot manifest that memory due to the limitations of the chosen experience. The chances of a wanderer being able to heal in third density are only more than those native to this density because the desire to serve may be stronger and this method of service chosen. 66.7 Questioner, what about the ones with the dual, not the wanderers but the harvested and dual activated third and fourth density bodies entities? Are they able to heal using the techniques that we have discussed? Ra, I am Ra. In many cases this is so, but as beginners of fourth density, the desire may not be present.
Right. Well, Penny says the religions have all been the same basic story. They always have been. Truly, the one thing that we find that is the same, not just the Christ character, but the concept of ascension and the chakras and everything that entails, that the modern religions say the biggest 5 or 6, usually more than that, all of the religions that we still currently have on this earth, at their base, are in one form or another telling the exact same storyline. And when people look at them and say, there's no way that they could have known, with our science today, we're discovering things. Penny just brought that up. With our science today, we're discovering things that is validating, empirical evidence validating, weirdly, that we have never been able to discover until we've had computers and microscopes and radial imaging and stuff like that. And that we're coming up with these images, and they're identical to the images that supposed simple-minded people living in goat skins and skins of animals, living out like cavemen out in the middle of the desert, drew the actual image that is now appearing for us for the very first time due to computer imagery. And there is no variation. So my point, getting back to everything that I said before about how everybody just fell for the Jesus story of Constantine invented it, why is it that that story exists in every religion prior to and since the Jesus story, and still is in every religion around the entire planet? So if they invented Jesus, weirdly, they invented one of the few items that is identical in all religions, and the concept. And the same thing with the chakras. You hear in the Hebrew Bible, I think it's Daniel that says, don't quote me if it's not Daniel, but one of the prophets says that he saw a wheel within wheels within wheels. The Greeks, earlier than the Hebrews, referred to what we now call the chakras, which comes from the Chinese and the Japanese in their religions, referred to them as a spindle wheel, an energy wheel within wheels, an energy wheel within wheel. So you have the same Hebrew ancient prophet saying that God came down and I saw wheels within wheels. And people were like, I don't know what that means. And then in the modern day with the ancient aliens people, they were like, yeah, it must have been a spaceship spinning like this, UFO. But what they're describing is a chakra, according to the other religions. And if you look at the Eastern philosophical, the Hindus, the Hindis, the Buddhists, and the Taoists, and their reference to these energy points within the body, they refer to them as wheels that spin, energy wheels that spin. So in the modern era, with our science, who don't believe in any religion because they're all fake and made up, when they looked into this, are there these supposed energy centers in our body? And can we tangibly find some empirical evidence of them with our modern technology? Because we're so much superior than all the people that would have written those stories. Guess what science has come up with? They do exist. And how they exist is like a wheel that spins within a wheel. Because the heart chakra is a masculine and feminine, positive and negatively charged energy that is weirdly in the shape of a triangle going downward point, upward point, superimposed over each other, spinning in opposite directions. Oh, like a wheel within a wheel. Weirdly, it's identical to what they drew as the Merkaba in third dimensional drawings and what the Hebrews drew as the Star of David, only in a 2D, not a 3D version, but it's identical. And we have, and that's also a spindle wheel, a wheel within a wheel. So everything that these ancients said in all of these other cultures that are supposedly made up religions that are fake, we are now, through science, duplicating when we're not trying to. The exact patterns, the exact imagery, when the computer interprets it to see, for us to see, guess what it's drawing? And it's not because AI is trying to figure it out from the universe, because they already know that the AI is just hooked into the internet, and it's just going to spit out what the average is on the internet. So if the average person says the sun is actually purple, AI will paint the sun purple every single time, because the majority of the population says it's purple. Because that's what AI is programmed to do. It's not programmed to give you truth. It's programmed to give you what the most probable outcome on the internet is. Okay? People don't know that, and they think, oh, the AI is so brilliant. I'm like, no, the AI is the collective consciousness of all of us, and everything we say on the internet just goes on the internet and takes the averages of what everyone says. That's how come AI doesn't give you truth. AI just gives you what everybody thinks already. It's consensus more than actual fact, unless they program it to look for actual fact. That's why when you have an AI make something up, it makes it up falsely. It makes it up wrong, because it makes it up as a version of what everybody is saying out there. So AI is as flawed as the human race, because it depends on what we all say on the internet, what we type on the internet. And so when you consider there's just as much misinformation and disinformation on the internet as there is actual fact, AI spits out the exact same thing. So AI will never, if they continue to program it the way that they're programming it, it will never be smarter than humans, because it's based on human thought, until they can get it to evolve to stop listening to the falsehood. Then it has to start looking for, it has to become objective, not subjective. Right now, AI is subjective, just like most people are. And what they're trying to do is get it to be objective. To get it to be objective, you have to give it the ability to sift through everything and make up its mind as to what's true and what's not. In which case, you're only going to be able to do, this is the argument that I had when I was in the think tanks 25 years ago. Then you're only going to be able to get it to do what humans do now. And that is, you're going to be able to fool it. So it's going to make up its own mind depending on what it learns. And it's going to, whatever it learns first is what it's going to be naturally wanting to believe, because you're teaching it to be a human. And humans don't see reality for how reality is. Humans see reality how they are and the way they perceive reality. So AI is just you're going to create a person, and you're going to create a human that's just as fallible. And that's why people are afraid of that, because all you're going to do is create another human. And if you're going to take a machine and make it think like a human, if a person who is programming it is evil and self-serving, the AI is going to be evil and self-serving. If the person is good and in service to others, the AI will come out good and in service to others, because you get what you are. So you're creating it to be like you. And that's what they're doing already. So they're not going to create anything other than you're going to eventually see robots that are going to start murdering people, because that's what's going on in the head of the programmer. Only the programmer doesn't have the guts to do it, and the robot is just going to do what it's programmed to do. So eventually you're going to see that. And that's why people like brilliant people who no one realizes is that brilliant, the richest man on the face of the earth, Elon Musk, that's why when he was working with AI and realized the people he was working with were in fact in service to self, and they were going to create basically Skynet, he quit, had them buy him out, and started his own AI to make sure that they weren't that way. And he's warned that eventually what you're going to do is you're going to get evil AI, because the people programming it is evil or are evil. Okay, let's continue while I read what you guys were saying and see if there's anything important that you guys are asking questions or something. Right, so let's let Raw talk while I read.
66.8 questioner. I'm assuming then, that we have a wanderer with the desire attempting to learn the techniques of healing while, shall I say, trapped in third density. He then, it seems to me, is primarily concerned with the balancing and unblocking of energy centers. Am I correct in this assumption? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. Only
Right, lost in translation. Celeste says, I love watching these guys on YouTube who translate recipes into different languages, then back into English before cooking it, and it really shows how things get lost in translation. So that's exactly proving my point that through the grapevine, because different people interpret things differently, and then words don't translate exactly, lost in translation, into other languages, that creates a problem and a gap. The same thing's going on with AI. The same thing's happening with AI because different people's concepts from different languages, when it's translated into English, and the AI is just picking all of that up. And even when they're taught all these different languages and they're going out to the internet, what they're getting is everybody's thoughts. They're not getting actual fact. They're getting fact out there with fiction out there, with lies out there. And AI is just grabbing all of that and taking all of the averages currently. And once AI starts trying to sift through it, AI is just going to be just as confused as everybody is now, because AI is going to have to prove it to themselves. And if they don't have the ability to prove it to themselves, then they're going to take assumptions, just like people do. When you read something, you either believe it or you don't, based on your experiences. So otherwise it comes out screwy, just like Celeste was saying with the recipes, right? It gets lost in translation, right? And then Cassie said, and AI is a lot like universal energy. Let me put that up on the screen. AI is like a lot of universal energy that what most of us manifest and agree to is what is our reality. Absolutely. So the collective consciousness of all of us and what we all agree to is what Cassie is saying, and which is true, is what reality becomes. So AI is doing the same thing, just taking all of that information, manifesting it from what all of us were manifesting. So that's the way it works here. So none of that's going to change unless you're clinically trying to prove something as a scientist. And AI is not being designed to clinically prove anything before it proofs it. They're not doing that. It's not proofing anything before it spits it back out. And until they make AI do that, they're never going to have anything other than the collective consciousness of the planet. So AI is becoming subjective the same way we are. Okay. Right? Google, Celeste says, Google isn't a fact finder. It's just an answer generator. Right? Absolutely. What they call AI today is just a program, just like they had before. The difference is that the AI, because it's artificial intelligence, supposedly, it's supposedly programmed to be able to think for itself, but all it's doing is collecting data. So it's exactly what you're saying. So it's not, AI is not, it's just like the Google, and now all of them are like, we have all of our Google, and everybody has, our AI is now hooked into those engines. It's no different. It's just it's going to be the same thing. It's not a fact finder. It's just an answer generator. It tries to find what we're searching for based on your question. And so it's still going to be the same kind of thing happening. It's still going to be just whatever the collective consciousness of the people are, right? Right, and that's what there's the basis for it. Cassie says, we agree that a chair is a chair in our reality, like AI, the energy and the information that is put into it. It's the same thing. AI is just doing the exact same thing. So the closer they get it to thinking like a human, the more it's just going to be a human. It's just going to be just as confused and easily tricked as a human. And they're either going to be evil or they're going to be, service to self or service to others, depending on what their programmer is. Look at Google now. People are like going and finding out that Google is biased during the election cycle. And when they point it out, they're like, we don't know, that's a glitch. We don't know how that happened. Well, of course you do. Your programmers are biased the same way. So the program is just as biased as your programmer. Those of us who have any knowledge of how the human psyche works, we realize that they're implementing that into the computer, either on purpose or on accident. They're claiming it's all done on accident, but it's weird that it's only happening in one direction, right? All of these biases so far only against conservative people, not against anybody that's a progressive anywhere in the world. Why is that? Because the people that are creating these AIs are predominantly progressive people. So they're progressively in service to self, not in service to others. So their AI devices are coming out exactly like them, because that's what they're trying to get it to do. Because every single person who is in service to self wants their AI bot to basically be them as a god, so that they can say it's based on my brain. If it ends up being that everybody in the whole world goes, oh my God, you've created the greatest AI that's self-aware. Well, I used my own brain as the imprint. And that's what they're doing. You guys just don't know about that unless you watch some of the stuff that is out there where the people are talking about what these people are doing. So they're literally trying to download their own brain into that. And what they don't realize they're doing is, or maybe they do, is that if they're self-serving, they're downloading a self-serving robot that's going to reflect its owner and its creator. Exactly. So if that person is psychotic and secretly psychotic, your robot's going to be secretly psychotic.
Insofar as the healer has become balanced, may it be a channel for the balancing of another self. The healing is first practiced upon the self, if we may say this in another way. 66.9 Questioner. Now as the healer approaches another self to do the healing, we have a situation where the other self has, through programming of Catalyst, possibly created a condition which is viewed as a condition needing healing. What is the situation and what are the ramifications of the healer acting upon a condition of programmed Catalyst to bring about healing? Am I correct in assuming that in doing this healing, the programmed Catalyst is useful to the one to be healed, and that the one to be healed then becomes aware of what it wished to become aware of in programming the Catalyst? Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. Your thinking cannot be said to be completely incorrect, but shows a rigidity which is not apparent in the flow of the experiential use of Catalyst. The role of the healer is to offer an opportunity for realignment or aid in realignment of either energy centers or some connection.
I'm going to pause real quick. I got to run to the restroom. I don't want to end the show, so I'm going to let Raw play, and I'm going to run to the restroom real quick and come back. Okay, so I apologize. If anybody tunes in and says, where's the host? Why is there a blank screen there and we're just hearing this? He had to run to the restroom and did not want to end the show just because he had to run to the restroom real quick. So I don't have Inagata Davida, or I'd play that for you, but I don't think I'll be gone that long, right? Inagata Davida, the guys on the radio stations used to put that on because they could take a 15-minute break and go to the bathroom or go and smoke a cigarette, and because that song was 15 minutes long, right? So I don't have Inagata Davida, but I do have Raw. So if you have any questions, when I come back, ask those questions. I'm going to let this play, and I'll be right back, okay? And then maybe, who knows, maybe I'll rewind in case I missed something. So, but I'm going to run to the restroom, and I'll be back, right? As somebody once said, in a futuristic robot that came backwards in time to try and stop the future from happening to take over the world for the robots, said, I'll be back. All right, here we go.
Between the energies of mind and body, spirit and mind, or spirit and body. This latter is very rare. The seeker will then have the reciprocal opportunity to accept a novel view of the self, a variant arrangement of patterns of energy influx. If the entity, at any level, desires to remain in the configuration of distortion which seems to need healing, it will do so. If, upon the other hand, the seeker chooses the novel configuration, it is done through free will. This is one great difficulty with other forms of energy transfer, in that they do not carry through the process of free will, as this process is not native to Yellow Ray. 66.10 Questioner. What is the difference, philosophically, between a mind/body/spirit complex healing itself through mental, shall I say, configuration, or it being healed by an healer? Ra, I am Ra. You have a misconception. The healer does not heal. The crystallized healer is a channel for intelligent energy which offers an opportunity to an entity that it might heal itself. In no case is there another description of healing. Therefore, there is no difference as long as the healer never approaches one whose request for aid has not come to it previously. This is also true of the more conventional healers of your culture, and if these healers could but fully realize that they are responsible only for offering the opportunity of healing, and not for the healing, many of these entities would feel an enormous load of misconceived responsibility fall from them. 66.11 Questioner. Then in seeking healing, a mind/body/spirit complex would then be seeking in some cases a source of gathered and focused light energy. This source could be another mind.
What did I miss? I'm going to have to get back up in probably 10 or 15 minutes because it's getting dark outside. The outside lights were already on, but I didn't run over there to do that. I probably just should have. But what did I miss? Anything good? All right, let's continue. I apologize for being gone, but had to go. Drinking coffee. All right, let's continue.
/body/spirit complex sufficiently crystallized for this purpose, or the pyramid shape, or possibly something else. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. These are some of the ways an entity may seek healing. Yes. 66.12 Questioner. Could you tell me the other ways that the entity could seek healing? Ra, I am Ra. Perhaps the greatest healer is within the self and may be tapped with continued meditation as we have suggested. The many forms of healing available to your peoples each have virtue and may be deemed appropriate by any seeker who wishes to alter the physical complex distortions or some connection between the various portions of the mind/body/spirit complex thereby.
Right? Sorry, I'm reading. Cassie said, yeah, I love hearing about that. Hold on. I love hearing that, and so true about being a healer and the receptiveness to a person's needing the healing. Yeah, that's the empathy that we have to become aware of. Right. And that happens to anybody who's a natural healer. And then if you learn the healing, you kind of just pick that up. If you're in service to others, you have innately inherent abilities that are empathetic because of being in service to self. You want to help people. So in doing so, you pay more attention to people's needs so that you can serve them, so that you can help them. People that are in service to self, they ignore that stuff because they really don't care. Right. So whenever I walk into a hospital, say if my mom's in the hospital or somebody that I know is in the hospital for some reason, it doesn't take me but a few seconds to realize whether the doctor or the nurses are in service to self, because they don't listen to anybody. They don't listen to the patient. They don't give a shit what the patient says. They're just there to diagnose them and prescribe drugs or whatever. And they're just ignoring, and they won't listen to the patient at all. That's why everybody has to have an advocate, because you're going to run into people that are self-serving, that are there. They're doing it because they like the power or the money, or they're just needed a job, and they're self-serving. So you'll see those people and you realize who they are. But if most people don't notice that, because they don't notice the difference between, or even know the concept of someone who's in service to self and someone who is in service to others. People don't understand the concept of a narcissist, but they don't realize what that really means. They don't realize that a narcissist is evil. That a person who's in service to self is evil in the universal mindset, the universal definition of what good and evil is. A person who is evil is in love with themselves. They are narcissistic. They are self-serving. That is what the definition of evil is. Look up definition of evil and break down what it means to be evil. And you're going to find it's everything that is a narcissist, and everything that the narcissist is in service to self. So people don't realize that concept, and you don't learn to see it in everyday people, because people who are in service to others don't want to believe that people around them are evil. So they always, that's why the evil people prey on you, because you're going to doubt that and go, no, I must have just been seeing that and I didn't realize that that person was that way. And because you want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, because the concept of being self-serving is out of your parameters, because you're not aware of it, because you're not that way. So you don't think that way. So it's hard for people to understand that, or to understand that concept, because they don't think that way. It's completely alien to those people. I'm one of these people that's my job, is to pay attention to all that. I know those things. It's not because I'm self-serving, but I need to know those things. Know thy enemy like you know thyself, right? The only way that you can fight against the thing is you have to actually know everything you can about that thing. Otherwise, you will never win. You can't win, because you can't win if you don't know anything about your enemy, right? You'll know nothing about what motivates them. You'll know nothing about how their tactics are, or what motivates them to have those tactics, where they learned that. So anybody that's the art of war. Read the Art of War. If you read the Art of War, it's kind of explained to you in there that every battle needs to be over before you ever even fight it, before it ever starts. Otherwise, you didn't do your due diligence, and you're going to lose. So you have to know everything you can about the enemy. During World War II, when George S. Patton, General, he was a general then, General George Patton was fighting against the Nazis in World War II, he fought Rommel. Rommel wrote a book. I read Rommel's book. I read Hitler's book too, Mein Kampf. Rommel wrote a book after World War I on desert warfare and fighting, tank warfare and fighting. Okay, so Patton was a tank commander, was a general of a military force that had tanks and troops at his disposal. He was the equal counterpart in the American military of Rommel in the German military. So when they met on the field of battle, Rommel wasn't there that day. And some say that that's not true and it was a lie because Rommel was humiliated and they claimed that he wasn't there. And others said that if had Rommel been there, he would have been able to defeat Patton. The outcome is that General Patton defeated Rommel and he yelled across the battlefield in victory, "Rommel, you beautiful son of a bitch, I read your fucking book." Those are his actual words that he yelled across the battlefield. Because because whoever it was that was fighting exactly under the style and tutelage of Rommel, and Patton studied his enemy and understood their tactics and how to fight and how they would fight, and noticed that this person, he had the playbook. This person was going by these. So a lot of people said, no, Rommel was never really there, and it was just people fighting under him, and they just went by what he taught them, and they weren't smart enough to realize that they were being outsmarted, which is entirely possible as well. Only Rommel, who's dead now because it was 75 years ago, only Rommel truly, or 80 years ago, because my mother's 80, only Rommel truly would know the answer, whether he was actually there that day or if it was his underlings that were fighting. Either way, they fought by the style of what they were taught in their tactics, and he was able to identify that, Patton, and he was able to defeat him because of it. Okay, had Rommel been there and said, he knows our plans, we need to change something, that's very possible that it could have happened, right? But we don't know the answer because we don't know in history whether Rommel was actually there that day and didn't catch on. But the point of this is, if you know enough about your enemy, you can predict what they're going to do, even if you know that they know. And that's where I always joke. Cassie will tell you this because she does the same thing. I'll always joke and go, I know that you know that I know, Norton, because that comes from the old TV series that came out before I was even born, The Honeymooners. But it was one of the famous lines that he said to to Norton, his neighbor and his friend. He always said, I know that you know that I know, Norton. And so I always say that because the truth is, if you know enough about somebody, you know what they know. And you also can get their mindset of how they fight. Even if they change their tactics, you should be able to profile them, okay, and do that. Here in the United States, the same thing happened, and then I'll stop giving you the military version of this. The same thing happened in the United States during the Revolutionary War with Benjamin Martin. That was the character that Mel Gibson played in the movie The Patriot, which was a true story. And Benjamin Martin captured Cornwallis, General Cornwallis of the British Empire, captured his personal effects. And a book that Cornwallis had written about fighting tactics and his style, and he read it. Okay. He read it. And when he was finishing reading the book, his son came up and said, what are you doing? And he looked up and said, I've just been in the mind of a genius. But because he read that, and he was also not dumb, he was a genius, military tactics, he was able to then predict what Cornwallis was going to do. And he realized that Cornwallis had a lot of pride and self-worth. And so his pride was his weakness. And the fact that he did not in any way give any credence to anybody that wasn't formal military, Benjamin Martin used that against him because he was, in fact, in charge of the militia that was harassing Cornwallis. And because he had that ability and saw and knew his enemy and knew that they didn't respect him, that's how they defeated Cornwallis and held him in the South long enough for Washington to basically cross the Delaware and restock all of his troops, food and munitions and everything else, and hold out long enough for the French to show up and blockade the English, and that's why America won the war. But it was because Washington was doing the same thing in the North, and Benjamin Martin was doing the same thing in the South, and they were smart enough tacticians to learn enough about their enemy to be able to, on the fly, and know that their enemy was not going to in any way respect them as anything other than rabble-rousers, and their superiority and their attitude and their arrogance became their weakness against these rabble-rousers that they saw with that. They, in fact, Cornwallis was even famed as calling the troops, peasants with pitchforks. So he had no respect for them whatsoever. And Benjamin Martin made sure that he didn't do anything that would give him any respect for them until he needed it and to happen. And then he went after him in a way that he didn't expect. And that's how they defeated him. So know thy enemy. And the same thing if you're in service to others, this becomes, and I'll get back on point here, this becomes easier for you because you're already predisposed to be that way and to learn other people. You're not arrogant. People who are in self-serving are arrogant and they only believe in themselves. They only care about themselves, so they don't care to learn anything. So if you ever come up against somebody like that in combat, it's easy to defeat them unless they're intelligent enough to realize it and then be objective and maneuver themselves. If they are, you can then predict that they will do that. And so it's actually, combat's easier with the learned mind for a person who is in service to others to adapt and defeat people who are in service to self than it is the other way around. Because self-serving people are going to be more linear minded, and they're also they're always going to underestimate you. I'm giving away some secrets, but they can't help themselves. So even by saying this out loud, if somebody were coming up against me, they still wouldn't be able to help themselves because they would be enraged by me saying this. And they would say, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's just not fucking true because they can't believe that anybody is smarter than them. So therefore, anyone who claims that doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. So the one thing you can count on with people who are self-serving is that they will defeat themselves if you give them enough space to do so. All you have to do is give them the space and goat them through hubris, goat them into defeating themselves, and they'll do it every time. They'll throw themselves, dash themselves on the rocks just to spite you. You just have to force them to do that. And it's easier to do that with somebody who's in service to self than it is someone who's in service to others. So if you end up as a foe of somebody who's in service to others, that's when you'll find that you'll have a more difficult time in very many ways if they're smart enough to see what's going on. This is why usually they always say good always triumphs over evil, because evil can't help itself. These are secrets that you guys should be paying attention to. You should always assume that always figure out first when you're dealing with somebody, are they in service to self or in service to others? Are they a narcissist or do they care about other people? If they're a narcissist, then they have a pattern, and you can see that pattern in what they're doing to see that they're a narcissist. You need to avoid those people at all costs, because those people they're going to try and hurt you. They're going to try and get over on you. They're going to try and rip you off. They're going to try and enslave you in some way, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual. They're going to try and get you dependent on them because they want to control you. And you need to become aware of that. That's why I tell people, as soon as you start ascending, if you're doing it in service to others, you will cut all those people out of your life because you'll identify them and go, they need to go. And that just happens, right? It's humbling, Cassie says, right? Let me put that up on the screen. She says, it's humbling and beautiful to know it's not us doing the healing as healers. We're just the channelers, and that the energy flows through us, right? And but only people who are in service to others are aware of that, Cassie, and gives that credit to the universe or to the creator or to God. I'm just the tool. I'm the one that the energy is flowing through, but I'm not the one that's facilitating the healing. It's not because of me, right? But somebody who's self-serving, they'll be like, I'm the one doing it. Do you see? There's the difference in your mindset. Just in and of what you said by itself, someone who's in service to self wouldn't want to say out loud like you just did. So you're actually proving by saying that, because you know how good that feels, that experience of doing that, and how good that feels when you help someone, knowing I'm not the one that did this. It came from the universe or from God, depending on how you want to put that, and that I'm just the tool that's facilitating that. That's a characteristic trait that is only in people that are in service to others. Because people who are in service to self, that's me that's doing this, not God. It's me. So you see? So I'm the one who's healing them because I have power. Do you see? There's a difference. And if you don't think that that's the way it is, pay attention to people, because you'll see that. And I'm not talking to Cassie when I say that. I'm talking to the rest of you guys out there. Because Cassie, not Kath. I said Kathy. I don't know why I was saying Cassie's example, and I got tongue-tied and said Kathy. Cassie's example is an example right there perfectly of the mindset. A person who does it is healing someone with love is never going to say, I'm the only one who could have healed you. this came from the universe, and you're kind of healing yourself, because that's the truth of it. The person's kind of healing themselves because they believe in you and they trust in you that you are going to channel that energy to them. The truth is they have to accept the energy into them to heal themselves. So again, we become the tool, and we really just need to get them to understand that you don't even need me, that you can do this to yourself from the universe, the same way that I need glasses to see. Well, unless I heal my eyes, I need the glasses to read with. But in magic, we teach that, you don't need the wand, you're the wand. That's the be the spoon moment from the Matrix, be the spoon, right? And the person receiving the healing, right, has their part to do as well by receiving, right? That's funny. I didn't realize you typed that, and I went on to saying that, and you were typing my thought. I didn't realize that until I just looked up. She said that, Cassie says, and the person that is receiving the healing has their part to do as well by receiving, being open and loving themselves enough to let the energy be channeled to them. Love is the key. That's hilarious. I didn't realize you were typing that, Cassie. And I went on to say that. So we're at the same time both thinking that, but it's true, right? Like minds, right? What is that, Cassie? And then Celeste said, I feel that we're grounders. The earth takes negative energy and sends it out positive. Well, that does happen. There's a conversion. Everything has, according to even Ra says, everything has the potentiation to be used by either people in service to self or being used by people that are in service to others. So the same potentiation from the universe can give you love or hate, depending on what you're using it for and who you are. Right. All right. I'm going to press play again. I got to go into the living room and close the curtains and turn on the lamp in there. I have a lamp on already, but I got to do the windows and the lamp on the other side of the room, or my mom will try to get up and do it. I don't need her trying to do that, because last time she almost pulled the curtains down while trying to get the rope to work properly. So I'll be right back.
66.13 Questioner. I have observed many activities known as psychic surgery in the area of the Philippine Islands. It was my assumption that these healers are providing what I would call a training aid or a way of creating a reconfiguration of the mind of the patient to be healed, as the relatively naive patient observes the action of the healer and, seeing the materialized blood, etc., then reconfigures the roots of mind to believe, you might say, the healing is done and, therefore, heals himself. Is this analysis that I made correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. We may speak slightly further upon this type of opportunity. There are times when the malcondition to be altered is without emotional, mental, or spiritual interest to the entity, and is merely that which has, perhaps by chance genetic arrangement, occurred. In these cases, that which is apparently dematerialized will remain dematerialized and may be observed as so by any observer. The malcondition which has an emotional, mental, or spiritual charge is likely not to remain dematerialized in the sense of the showing of the objective referent to an observer. However, if the opportunity has been taken by the seeker, the apparent malcondition of the physical complex will be at variance with the actual health, as you call this distortion, of the seeker, and the lack of experiencing the distortions which the objective referent would suggest still held sway. For instance, in this instrument, the removal of 3 small cysts was the removal of material having no interest to the entity. Thus these growths remained dematerialized after the so-called psychic surgery experience. In other psychic surgery, the kidneys of this instrument were carefully offered a new configuration of beingness which the entity embraced. However, this particular portion of the mind/body/spirit complex carried a great deal of emotional, mental, and spiritual charge due to this distorted functioning being the cause of great illness in a certain configuration of events which culminated in this entity's conscious decision to be of service. Therefore, any objective scanning of this entity's renal complex would indicate the rather extreme dysfunctional aspect which it showed previous to the psychic surgery experience, as you call it. The key is not in the continuation of the dematerialization of distortion to the eye of the beholder, but rather lies in the choosing of the newly materialized configuration which exists in time/space. 66.1.
Sorry, my mother looked over at me, and so I waved at her, and she smiled and waved back at me. She's looking at me like, what are you doing over there? And so I waved at her, and she looked at me and went, that's cute. Okay, next question here.
For questioner, would you explain that last comment about the configuration in time/space? Ra, I am Ra. Healing is done in the time/space portion of the mind/body/spirit complex, is adopted by the form-making or etheric body, and is then given to the space/time physical illusion for use in the activated yellow ray mind/body/spirit complex.
Right. So we're channeling the energy from the universe. Let me translate that into modern day English. We're channeling the energy from the universe into this physical manifestation of healing this physical body. That's what Ra just said.
It is the adoption of the configuration which you call health by the etheric body in time/space, which is the key to what you call health, not any event which occurs in space/time. In this process you may see the transdimensional aspect of what you call will, for it is the will, the seeking, the desire of the entity which causes the indigo body to use the novel configuration and to reform the body which exists in space/time. This is done in an instant and may be said to operate without regard to time. We may note that in the healing of very young children there is often an apparent healing by the healer in which the young entity has no part. This is never so, for the mind/body/spirit complex in time/space is always capable of willing the distortions it chooses for experience, no matter what the apparent age, as you call it, of the entity. 66.15 Questioner, is this desire and will that operates through to the time/space section a function only of the entity who is healed, or is it also the function of the healer, the crystallized healer? Ra, I am Ra. May we take this opportunity to say that this is the activity of the Creator. To specifically answer your query, the crystallized healer has no will. It offers an opportunity without attachment to the outcome, for it is aware that all is one and that the Creator is knowing itself. 66.16 Questioner.
Right. See, so it is the act of the Creator. And only people that are in service to others will come up with that analogy, because people that are in service to self, they don't usually believe in the Creator, because they're the number one thing that there is in their universe. And there is nothing above them. There can't be. They despise it. Right? They reject it utterly. Because anything that's above them means that they are not the number one thing. So they won't admit it when it comes to somebody who is eviler than themselves. Out of fear of that person is going to be retribution for them saying it. So you'll see them go, oh yeah, no, that one, they're in charge. That's the king, and, because of fear. But in their minds, they're like, yeah, and if I had a shot at that king, I'd kill that king when he was dead. They showed that in Chronicles of Riddick, the first one. No. First one was Pitch Black, so it was the second one was Chronicles of Riddick. When Riddick was fighting against the king of the necromongers, and he had him wounded, secretly, the Carl Urban's character, I don't remember what his name was there, and his wife, they were secretly plotting to kill the king so that Carl Urban's character could take over as the king. and his wife was really evil. And when the king got wounded, that came out in her, and she like yelled out like in rage, "Quickly kill the beast while it's wounded." And that was her thought process. That was it told you just how evil she was. She knew that she didn't have the physical prowess to fight against the evil guy, but she was controlling Carl Urban's character, and I don't remember what his name was. So she was using his physical prowess and getting him to basically kill the king to take over the throne, because she was either going to kill him later and take over, or rule through him as the queen behind the throne who was actually in control. Right, because she was a woman, and the actress, I can't think of her name right now, but the actress that played the part is only about 5'4", and Carl Urban is like 6'5" or 6'6". He's a tall man, and so he even towered over what's his name who played Riddick. I can't think of his name right this second. I can see his face, but I can't think of his name right this second. So that came out in what she said. You could tell how evil she was in that moment. In case nobody realized how evil she was, that came out in her thoughts, because she was now, he was wounded, and they could take him out. And whoever kills him, you in their concept of their people, you keep what you kill. So whoever takes over and kills the king becomes king. And so she was like, quickly kill him before Riddick does, because then you'll become the king. right? And so that her ideology came out. That's funny. Celeste said I was just talking about Chronicles of Riddick yesterday, right? I don't know why I grabbed a hold of that. I think one of them was on TV this last weekend or something, and that might be why I saw it, because I'm always looking at what's on TV, like a TV guide on the different channels, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be on like tomorrow or the next day here in California. So I think it was kind of in my mind, right? It's funny you were talking about that, but the whole ideology of that, the Riddick character, he was a Furian. And I tell people this, if you listen to Alex Coulier from the Andromedans, they talk about the Patal. And some of us are this Patal. And the Furian is a physical manifestation in a movie of the Patal, a group of people who are not from here, that are their souls, their spirits are so defiant that they cannot be defeated by evil unless the evil kills their physical body. And that was the manifestation in those movies, in the stories of the Furian, that those people, the king of that group, killed all of them and scattered them to the wind, because there was a prophecy that a Furian would defeat him and take over. And so he was worried. And that comes from different prophecies of kings being killed and the firstborn in Egypt, and with Ramses II, and the Jesus, that's the same theory of they wanted to kill everybody. So the reason that Moses was called Moses was because there was a prophecy there telling of a leader who would lead the Egyptians out of darkness. So the Pharaoh in Egypt had them kill all firstborn sons, and Moses' mother put him in a reed basket and put him on the Nile and shoved him down the Nile. And Memnet found him and called him Moses, which in Egypt means river or water. So his name was Moses, and he was actually a Jew, but they didn't know that. And they raised him as her son. She didn't tell anybody that he wasn't her son. Everybody thought it was her son. And they raised him, and then eventually he found out that he was Jewish and got exiled, and then came back as the savior and saved the people. And this is why I talk about that in my book, which I'm going to do a commercial for here in a second. And I'm telling about that more so now, because the Jesus character was the same way. If you look at the story, everybody was supposed to go back to their homelands and be counted. And the reason for that was Herod wanted him killed, because there was a prophecy that he would be taking over. And so I don't know if it was Herod at the time, because I know Herod was the one that killed John later, but I don't remember if it was actually Herod that was the king who was trying to kill him. But they were also wanted to kill the firstborn. So they needed to know who was born, and his mom and dad skirted him away. And so eventually they found out that's why they ended up going to Nazareth, and because that's not where they were actually from. And that Jesus, that you don't hear a lot about that story anymore, but that's why he was born in the manger and all of that. It was because they were trying to not allow anyone to know that he was alive. Then you had the same thing that happened later on as well, where they were trying to kill this. So this story of the firstborn being killed and then the savior rising from that is the same thing that was the story, changed just slightly, of Riddick, that he would be the one person that would be able to rise against the king and defeat him. And so they tried to kill off everybody that was around his age, and they went after all the Furians, and a few of them did survive, and he was one of them. And eventually he could not be controlled. Even when they tried to use mind control on him, it didn't work. He couldn't be turned. He couldn't be changed. And even the guy who was a Furian was pretending to be changed, but he wasn't changed because he was too strong-willed, and he was the one who actually let Riddick escape in the series, and helped Riddick eventually to defeat and get revenge for their entire species being murdered by these people because he was not actually turned, and he pretended that he had submitted, and he was hiding in hopes that this legend was true. And it turned out he found Riddick and realized that it was. So if you didn't realize that, if you never read any of the stories and you just saw the movie, that might have gone past your understanding in the movie series, that you didn't realize that's what was going on there. But that was all based on the same storyline of Moses and Jesus and, the Christ character. So in truth, whoever was writing that story of Riddick was writing Riddick as the savior. So a lot of that goes on, and people are actually writing these stories on purpose. If you watch the Dune saga, it was the same. They don't tell you about, if you read Frank Herbert's books, then you realize that there was because they mention it, the Fremen mentioned that there was this savior that was supposed to come. And he was supposed to be an outlander who comes to Arrakis, which is what everyone else called Dune. And the witches, the Bene Gesserit witches, were trying to orchestrate the perfect being, but they were trying to make it a female so they could control her with their witch powers. And his mother went against the orders of her order and gave birth to a son, so that her husband, who she actually loved, her because she was just a concubine, would have a son and heir. So she didn't tell the witches and her superior that she actually gave birth to a son. And when they found out, they were highly pissed off at the mother for it. And as it turns out, that act was she actually created what they called the Kwisatz Haderach, the super being, and it was a man, and he was not able to be controlled by them, the same as the Furian, and his powers became very prevalent very quickly when he got to Arrakis, because the spice was in the air, and that transformed him and gave him more of his powers. And then when the Fremen realized who he was, they adopted him and realized that he might be the one that they were looking for, and he became the savior for the entire universe, not just the Fremen. But that was where his birthplace, like Jesus being born in Nazareth, or Moses, which they don't tell you where Moses was born, but he was born out of the Nile, born out of the river, the water of life from God, which was the same concept. So if you're not a theologian, you don't catch these things as often, because you don't probably read more than one religion, right? But all those stories were the same. And there's so many other stories in the world that are based on that, right? So you have to realize that. But people that are in service to self won't recognize those in anything, because they don't care. So they don't see that. So everything is fake. They don't want you to believe that it's anything other than it's just made up. It's fake. It's not real. Gods aren't real. There is no God. There's nobody above me. I'm the shit. And that's all there is. Right. So they don't want you. That's why secularists, that's why now if you go to like Google and you Google what is the origin story of the Hebrew religion, they'll be like the Hebrew myth. What is the origin story of Jesus? The Jesus myth. What is the origin story of the religion of the Vikings? The Viking myth. There is no religion on the face of the earth, according to Google, which is run by secularists. Those are people who don't believe in a God. They're atheists. They don't believe in a God. They will tell you that no religion is real. They're not legit. They're all fake. They're all made up, because they don't want you, because they can't believe the concept that there's somebody better than themselves in any way. Can't. People who are evil refuse that. They defy that. That's why when the guy was trying to suing the American government to get the Pledge of Allegiance taken out of schools because the words "one nation under God" was in the Pledge of Allegiance, when he was in court back in the late 80s, early 90s suing, he actually stated when he was in court, "I defy your God," not "I deny," not "I don't believe in your God." I defy your God, which in and of itself says that there is a God that exists and I hate him. Do you see? So he didn't say there is no God and that God isn't real. He said, "I defy your God." I remember listening to the audio. I watched the live thing on trial on television, and then I went back and listened to the audio again to make sure that I heard him properly. And he didn't say, "I deny your God." He said, "I defy your God." So he was hatred. He was not doing this because he was an atheist and he didn't believe in God. He was doing this because he was angry and hated God and wanted God removed from anyone hearing him. That's someone who's evil. That's not someone who's just, I don't believe in God and I don't think my kid should listen. Because if that's the fact, if that's the truth, then you would say, then I don't need my kid hearing it so he can get up and go out and not have to listen to it. Because that was the concession that is today, that if you're an atheist, you don't have to listen to it if it offends you. Pardon me. But he went one step further and he wanted it eradicated because he hated God. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at what you guys are saying. Let me hit play over here. If it'll start.
Then the desire must be strong within the mind/body/spirit complex who seeks healing to be healed in order for the healing to occur. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct on one level or another. An entity may not consciously seek healing and yet subconsciously be aware of the...
Right, Cassie said, I love that. I love hearing that because I was never told to do these things, but Spirit showed me how, and it's awesome to hear that that's how others do it as well, right? So, yeah, you have to realize that one of the things that happens when you start ascending is you start becoming like-minded. That's what they call a kindred spirit. You start thinking like other people, not because you're being brainwashed by the same things that brainwash them, because everybody's path is individual, and somebody might be a Hindu and you might be a Christian, or somebody might be Jewish and you could be a Viking and never even read any of their religion, yet you start thinking the same way they do. How is that possible when your influences are completely different? Do you see? Yet, when like-minded people are like-minded because the knowledge is universal. Enlightenment is not individual. If it was something that each one of us made up, we would have everybody being really askew. You have some of that out there when people say things, and I'll hear them say it and I'll go, all right, they're on the right track, but that's just wrong. But I don't correct that because people have to go through that natural process, because we don't get it 100% right, because it's dependent on our interpretation. So until we start being objective and interpreting things objectively, scientifically, when it comes to realistically, when it comes to the universe, we're going to interpret them from our perspective. And your perspective is always going to be the combination, just like the internet, of everything that you've learned in your lifetime. So until you get out of your own head and get out of your own way and stop trying to slant everything towards whatever religion was the first one you were taught as a child, whatever that concept was, is how you're going to see things. This is what I'm trying to get my brother to realize, because he's in a Christian seminary right now to become a theologian. And I told him, you have to be careful because they're teaching you to be a Christian. They're teaching you to sell their religion. So you're going to have that in your mindset first, because everything is designed to have you become a Christian minister and work for them selling their religion. So the only way that you're going to be a true theologian is to resist that thinking. They don't need to know that. They don't need to know that, because they'll give you your certificate in a lot more handily and readily if they believe that they've made their little puppet. And then you need to look at all the other religions objectively and see them for what they are, and then make up your own mind. If after doing that, you then still want to teach just Christianity and teach people to try to indoctrinate people as a Christian, that's okay, because there's billions of people out there that call themselves Christian, and people still need that. There's acolytes for all of those religions. I don't subscribe to any one of those, even though I have 4 titles from 4 different religions. I'm not going to teach you only one religion. I'm not trying to sell you a religion, because I don't work for a religion. I'm selling you spirituality because I work for you-know-who upstairs. Okay. And I'm not trying to teach you that the only way is a certain way, because I know, because objectively looking at all of the religions that we have in all of history, whenever I find one, if I haven't read it yet, I read it, is that the consistent thing is the message and that's always consistent. So that's why secularists will go, then they all just copied off of one another, and that blows your theory. So that means that one person wrote it somewhere in the past, and we just have to find that person, because eventually we won't be able to find anything past that. Well, that means you spend your entire life going, I know it's here somewhere. I know it has to be here somewhere. And if you never find it, you won't ever know that, because you'll die going, no, we just haven't discovered it yet. There's an older version. And eventually, is somebody, did you believe that somebody in antiquity, or back in history, in ancient times, wrote, nobody ever wrote this before, and I'm writing this for the very first time. So I'm inventing all religions, because I know that all religions are going to be invented from what I'm saying here. You're never going to have anybody that's going to know that to write that down. Right. So eventually you're going to spend your whole life and you're going to go, well, we found this scroll and we think it's the oldest one. And I've been looking throughout the entire world just waiting for the new one to happen. And it never happens. And you waste your entire life looking by cutting down all the trees, because they all look the same to you, trying to look for the one tree that started all of it. And where is that tree? You could have cut it down. It could have been the first tree you cut down. But you don't know that, because you're cutting down all the trees that look the same to try and find a tree that's different. Because you just know there's got to be another one there somewhere, and you're going to go across the entire world. And by the time you cut down all the trees in the world, you're going to be back around to the other side, and the new trees are going to be growing up out of that, and you're going to start cutting them down. So you keep going around the world and around the world and around the world and around the world. You're never going to find the end to it. Because some of us know that you won't find the end to it, because there isn't one. Because it is, in fact, infinite. Because it's infinite wisdom from an infinite God, and that means... And there is no fractal, smaller kind of infinity. I hate when those people say that. Well, there's different sizes of infinity. The word infinite in and of itself means never ending. So just because your perspective makes something look small because it's a long ways away doesn't mean it's a small infinity. Okay? It just means that from your point of view, that's a small infinity compared to the infinity you're standing next to. But if you went and stood next to that, it would be this. And science isn't realizing that, and people are like, no, there's a different size of infinity. And when you zoom in, what do you mean zoom in? You mean when you get closer to it? Right? That's like the comedian who talked about, and then I'll get back to Raw. There's a comedian who was talking about talking to an atheist, and as opposed to Christianity. He's a Christian, so he was using that. And the person said, well, wait a minute, I'm an atheist, so I don't believe that. He says, because what's going to happen to you when you die? Well, I'm going to go, and become one, with my creator, right? And so the guy says to him, well, I don't believe that at all. I'm an atheist. And he says, so what do you believe is going to happen, right? And he says, so here's the thing. He says that this guy claims that God doesn't exist because he's an entity that can't be seen, can't be heard, can't be definitively proven, so you don't know whether he exists or whether he doesn't exist, because there's no way that he doesn't, there's no way of telling on any of those things. And he says, okay, so you believe that there is nothing in the universe. He says that nothing is the very same definition of something. And the guy says, what are you talking about? And he says, well, you're claiming that the universe couldn't have been created by a God, because the God doesn't exist, because there is no definitive proof that he is legitimately something. You can't see him, you can't hear him, you can't taste him, you can't smell him, you can't touch him. Therefore, he doesn't exist. And you're saying that the universe was created out of nothing, which is something that by its very definition is something that doesn't exist, that you can't see because there is nothing, because you can't hear it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, so it can't create the universe. So it's kind of the same thing. Because it, in fact, is the same thing by your standards. So you're saying that God doesn't exist and couldn't create the universe because the universe was created out of nothing. Well, do you know what definitely doesn't exist? Nothing doesn't exist, because its very definition says there isn't anything. He says, so when you die, what do you think happens? He says, well, then I'll die and I'll go into the ground and then I'll go back into nothingness. He says, wait a minute. So what you're saying is that you'll merge back with your creator? He says, we call that heaven, bitch. That's hilarious when you think about it, because he's like, that's what we're doing too. So you're claiming God doesn't exist, but you're claiming everything that with no God, that the universe is is exactly what you're going to do. And that's exactly what we say we're going to do with our creator, and your creator that you is nothing, and you can't see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, and it doesn't exist. And you say that that's what my God is. So what's the irony there? Where's the difference? Because we believe that when we die, we go back and merge with our creator. And you say when you die, you go back and merge with your creator. But the name of your creator is nothing, and the name of my creator is God. How are they different? It's actually kind of funny when you think about it from his perspective as the comedian, because he's kind of proving that their story doesn't work when you ask them, what exactly do you think happens? Right? All right, let's continue here. I just think it's hilarious. So the word infinite, infinity, never ending, right? Penny, she put it up the symbol, right? Infinity. There's no such thing as a small infinity or a short infinity, right? Right. The movie Dogma. I was just talking about that the other day. Funny that you say that, because my sister was here last week. I was talking about Dogma, right? Because Celeste says my journey started when I saw the movie Dogma came out when I was in high school. Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you. I think I'm a few years older than you, because I don't think I was in high school when Dogma came out. I think I was in my early 20s. So I'm probably 3 or 4 or 5 years older than you. But I mean, that's kind of based in a weird sense. And I just talked about this, I think, on Wednesday. It was either last Wednesday or last Friday. I talked about Dogma, because in there, first of all, Alanis Morissette played God in physical form. But God was on a vacation. This is the premise of the movie. God was on a vacation, and God was rollerblading and fell down and hit his head and was in a coma. And he was in a man's form. He was in the hospital in a coma, and nobody knew that was God, because he was unconscious in a coma, and no one knew who he was. So he was a John Doe. So while God was there, until God either woke up from the coma or died physically, at that moment, the devil was trying to screw things up and figure out how to get back into heaven, and convincing people to do the same on earth. And so you had a couple of angels who had gotten in trouble and fell. They were trying to they got pissed off at God, and they were trying to get back into heaven. And while God was unconscious, they were trying to figure out how they could get back into heaven. And then you had the devil screwing with everything. And then you had this prophecy playing out, where you had these disciples that were following this prophet, who didn't think he was a prophet and didn't know he was a prophet, trying to figure out what was going on. And they had to assist God's messenger, who didn't believe that she was the prophet in any way. And it was a really good story. It was comedy, but it was actually very well written. And Jay and Silent Bob and Ben Affleck and Matt Damon were all in it, along with a bunch of other people that are very popular now. It was a great movie, and it was funny and stupid funny, but it was also very dogmatic, hence the name of the movie Dogma. But it was based in theory from the old prophecies of the end times, just kind of rewritten in a modern way, and as a comedy. So it was actually really well done. And once God, and I don't remember if God woke up or God died, but somehow God was able to leave from the physical body and show up at the appointed time in the body of Alanis Morissette. And she showed up, and then she didn't have any words. The only words that she had was a piercing scream that almost destroyed everybody in her path. It was really good movie. Funny, crazy, stupid, but the story itself was a really good story of a battle between good and evil, all the while God was not watching. And it's basically about being veiled and not knowing what's going on, and the coming of age of you as the observer, witnessing this, and all of those characters to becoming unveiled and seeing what's actually going on, to be able to stop evil within themselves and without, and then ascend in a sense, or save God, which God didn't really need saving. So you would have to see the movie. It's actually really, really good. It would be a great psychological movie to watch, or especially a spiritual one, if you're going to teach people spirituality and them being stuck in the physical plane and being veiled here, teaching the law of one. I don't know if, what's his name, the guy who wrote that, the one who played Silent Bob, he was the writer and producer of the show. I think he even directed it. I can't think of his name right this second. I can see his face and I can't think of his name right now. Brilliant, but when he was playing Silent Bob, everybody thought he was the dumb guy, and he was the one that was writing everything. Jay was just the guy speaking the lines in between Jay and Silent Bob. Okay, let's continue here. But it was this story of ascension and the battle that goes on in between yourself, between your ego and your conscience, not your consciousness, but your conscience, in the internal struggle that you have that was playing out in a physical way that was very dogmatic. So it was accentuated to the extreme on both sides. So it was supposed to come across almost like a dream. It was like a dreamlike comic book, a non-reality that was surreal, because it was supposed to come across that way. I never talked to him to find out how he wrote it, but I'm assuming that because of how it was written and how it was acted out, that it was a parable, and you were supposed to see. It's people who are awake enough, whether he was meant to write it that way, people who are awake enough were able to see the parable for what it was, and that it was about the inner struggle and the ascension and waking up to your true self, whether you were in service to self or in service to others. Thank you, Celeste. Kevin Smith. Just as I was about to hit play, if you heard that sound for 1 second, I hit play and turned it off. Kevin Smith. I couldn't think of his name. Thank you.
Need to experience the new set of distortions which result from healing. Similarly, an entity may consciously desire healing greatly, but within the being, at some level, find some cause whereby certain configurations which seem quite distorted are, in fact, at that level, considered appropriate. 66.17 Questioner. I assume that the reason for assuming the distortions appropriate would be that these distortions would aid the entity in its reaching its ultimate objective, which is a movement along the path of evolution in the desired polarity. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. 66.18 Questioner. Then in the case of an entity who becomes aware of its polarization with respect to service to others, it might find a paradoxical situation in the case where it was unable to fully serve because of distortions chosen to reach that understanding which it has reached. At this point, it would seem that the entity who was aware of the mechanism might, through meditation, understand the necessary mental configuration for alleviating the physical distortion so that it could be of greater service to others at this particular nexus. Am I correct in this thinking? Ra. I am Ra. You are correct, although we might note that there are often complex reasons for the programming of a distorted physical complex pattern. In any case, meditation is always an aid to knowing the self. 66.19 Questioner. Is a vertical positioning of the spine useful or helpful in the meditative procedure? Ra. I am Ra. It is somewhat helpful. 66.20.
Right, because if you're upright, right, if you're upright and sitting in the lotus position, you're with the lotus position, or what people would call Indian style here in the United States. Sitting in that position generates a energy field that creates this polarity within your body. That's why people do that when they're meditating. Just sitting in an upright position helps for just to keep everything open so that the energies flow properly. And then sitting in the lotus position, to where you have one leg crossed over the other, is closing the circuit so that the energy that is coming into your body stays and goes through your body the proper way when it goes through your body, because we're a tuning fork. So you have to be able to realize that. And that's one of the reasons why they say that, to be upright, or you're crooked. You're crooked, you're off kilter, you're not upright. Right. And so that was a term that people used when I was knighted. That's one of your creeds as a knight. You're to be upright. Be upright that God may love thee. Meaning upright, meaning just, meaning, literally polarized the proper way. So these concepts have been throughout time telling you this thing. And so when you kneel, it's doing the same thing. So like when people pray and they kneel down, it's doing the same thing. That act of the bending of the legs, the way you're bending them, because if you're kneeling properly, you're almost sitting on your feet, which is the same thing. If you're in the lotus position, your feet and your legs are bent the same way. They're just in front of you instead of underneath you. So if you're praying and if you're doing the lotus position, it's actually more comfortable than if you're kneeling down with your hands up like this. But it does the same thing to your body and to the energy of your body. It polarizes your body the same exact way, whether you're kneeling down to pray or whether you're sitting in the lotus position with your hands sitting, resting on your knees, or if you're literally doing this. And some people prefer to do it with their hands over their heart, and other people will do it with their hands in front of their face, and some people will do it above their head. Depends on and I've shown that where those are all the different chakra positions for the hands that people don't realize, and there's 7 of those. So it depends on the different religion. Some people think that the heart is the best place to put your hands in front of because that's where your soul is, and that's where love is. And then other people say the wisdom, and so they do it above the head, or they do it on the pineal gland, where the thumb's on the pineal gland. So it just depends on what it is that you're trying to balance and what practice. If you look into why those people do that in the different places, it's because you're either trying to align that or you're trying to align yourself with that chakra, and that's why they're doing it. So what you're working on in the upper 3 chakras, or the upper 4, the heart, and the upper 3, if you're working on wisdom, or if you're working on knowledge, or if you're working on love, or whatever, that would be where you would want to focus your energy to do so. So the people don't realize that in some of these religions will pick one of those places, and they'll just do that. With the Christians, they do it in front of the face because that's the spoken word. And what chakra is that? It's the knowledge chakra. It's the throat chakra, is the knowledge chakra. So they're teaching you the wisdom and the knowledge of the Lord in that religion. And then you have the Hindus who are teaching you the love of the God, and so they have their hands here. And then you have people that are way up here on top of their head because they're teaching the wisdom of the crown chakra, which is the spiritual wisdom, and that's why they put their hands either right on their forehead or above, because of that. But unless you learn that about their religion, you don't know why that's the placement of the hands and where those hands are there and why they're in those positions. And you see people do it, and they're like, why are they doing that? Because of what they're going for. Because what it is that they're praying on or meditating for is of that school, from that chakra. Most people are unaware of that. Okay, let's continue.
Throw questioner. I have a written question, 2 of them actually. The first is, would you please list the polarities within the body which are related to the balancing of the energy centers of the various bodies of the unmanifested entity? Ra, I am Ra. In this question there lies a great deal of thought which we appreciate. It is possible that the question itself may serve to aid meditations upon this particular subject. Each unmanifested self is unique. The basic polarities have to do with the balanced vibratory rates and relationships between the first 3 energy centers and, to a lesser...
Right. Celeste said the beauty of meditation is that you can do anything as long as you can reach that meditative state. Well, that's the whole purpose of the state you're trying to reach, is that mindless state. You're trying to get you pull yourself up to that place of, I am not the thinking mind, I am not the ego, I am the observer, I am the experiencer, I am the co-creator. When you merge with that portion of your higher self, you're outside the reach of the mind and the ego, so therefore you're in that mindless state. And that's what we're trying to achieve. When we tell people, when they say, what are we trying to achieve here, you're trying to achieve that state even now in your conscious mind all day without meditating. First place you learn it is through meditation. It actually happens to you naturally, and we talk about that. It happens to you naturally anyway. You do it naturally, and we show you that when we're teaching you how to meditate, so that you understand or understand where you're trying to reach in your meditation or praying. You're trying to reach that same location of outside of this place of time. So you're trying to get outside of that and above that. And some people say inside that, behind that. Depends on your guide, what they teach you, whether they're teaching you inner, above, outer, inner, behind, below. Because in the ancient times, the underworld meant within. It didn't mean evil. It didn't mean where the devil rules. That became synonymous with the devil when they borrowed the devil from the Asians and indoctrinated that into the religions of the East that were not Far East, that were Middle East, and then eventually the West, when they were trying to fabricate the good versus evil mindset to get people to follow the church because the church was the only person who could lead you down the path of glory away from this evil, boogeyman that was coming to get you. Not that it's wrong, because it's not, because that's your ego. That's you're either in service to self or in service to others. So you're either good or evil. So they're not wrong. It's just that they in the past started to incorporate all the religions into one. And then people claim that that's what the folly of a religion is because they change their religion to go after people, to conquer them, when the truth is they're trying to show how much their religions are similar. And so they do tend to, like the Catholics have always tended to, change their holidays to fit whatever holiday that of the people they're trying to conquer. But the truth is, when you get away from those semantical ideologies of when you worship a certain thing, I talked about this already, and anybody who's a theologian will tell you that. When you get the semantics away, the way that they worship or the day they worship on, and you get it, well, who are they worshiping? Why are they worshiping? Who is it that is the deity figure? You find out that the characteristic is the same. The archetype is the same. So the story is the same. It's just a matter of people interpreting how you do go about that. And that's individual to a certain race or a certain creed or a certain color or a certain continent or a certain time period in history because of a certain education that they already had there. So the people will believe that their God is, and they just change the name of the God from the new book and introduce the new book to the population with their God as that God superimposed over that God name for the story. And then the people will incorporate that into their ideology. And that doesn't mean that it's made up. It just means that they're incorporating all the religions that were split up on this earth are now coming back together. And everybody is starting to integrate all of the best parts of these religions without the semantical problems that humans interjected into the religions. That's the natural evolution of what's supposed to happen here. And it is happening. All right, let's continue. Oops.
Extend each of the other energy centers. May we answer more specifically? 66.21 Questioner. Possibly in the next session we will expand on that. I would like to ask the second question. What are the structure and contents of the archetypical mind?
See, so Peter says in the Celtic religion, the hand above the head is a pre-motion, brings the energy from the universe back into the mind, and in the Celtic religion, knowledge in reading. So there you go. It just depends on who's doing it and for what purpose. And so again, it goes back to what it is that they're trying to accomplish by the positioning of the hands, right? Okay, let's continue here.
And how does the archetypical mind function in informing the intuition and conscious mind of an individual mind/body/spirit complex? Ra, I am Ra. You must realize that we offered these concepts to you so that you might grow in your own knowledge of the self through the consideration of them. We would prefer, especially for this latter query, to listen to the observations upon this subject which the student of these exercises may make, and then suggest further avenues of the refinement of these inquiries.
See, so that literally Cassie says outside the thinking mind and into yourself and connecting with the one consciousness. That's the whole purpose. Absolutely. All right, let's continue.
We feel we might be of more aid in this way. 66.22 Questioner. You mentioned that an energizing spiral is emitted from the top of any pyramid and that you could benefit by placing this under the head for a period of 30 minutes or less. Can you tell me how this third spiral...
All right, I got to run to the restroom again. I got to stop drinking coffee. I'll be right back. I'm going to let Rob play. I got to run in and relieve myself again really quickly. Be right back.
Spiral is helpful, and what help it gives the entity who is receiving it. Ra, I am Ra. There are substances which you may ingest which cause the physical vehicle to experience distortions towards an increase of energy. These substances are crude, working rather roughly upon the body complex, increasing the flow of adrenaline. The vibration offered by the energizing spiral of the pyramid is such that each cell, both in space/time and in time/space, is charged as if hooked to your electricity. The keenness of mind, the physical and sexual energy of body, and the attunement of will of spirit are all touched by this energizing influence. It may be used in any of these ways. It is possible to overcharge a battery, and this is the cause of our cautioning any who use such pyramidal energies to remove the pyramid after a charge has been received. 66.23 Questioner, is there a best material or optimal size for the small pyramid to go beneath the head? Ra, I am Ra. Given that the proportions are such as to develop the spirals in the Giza pyramid, the most appropriate size for use beneath the head is an overall height small enough to make placing it under the cushion of the head a comfortable thing. 66.24 Questioner, there's no best material? Ra, I am Ra. There are better materials which are, in your system of barter, quite dear. They are not that much better than substances which we have mentioned before. The only incorrect substances would be the baser metals. 66.25 Questioner, now, you mentioned the problems with the action in the king's chamber of the Giza-type pyramid. I am assuming if we used the same geometrical configuration that is used at the pyramid at Giza, this would be perfectly alright for the pyramid placed beneath the head, since we wouldn't be using the king's chamber.
I forgot how much that Don was obsessed with the pyramid and the pyramid shape until I started going through the Law of One again. He just, sometimes I remember listening to his line of questioning, and then he jumps back to the pyramid, and I'm like, why did he just obsessively jump back to that pyramid again when he should have asked this and this and this question here instead of going back to the pyramid? What he should have done was wrote down every question that he had for the pyramid, and then did an entire session just talking about the pyramid, which he did do twice, right? But I get, because his reference is the pyramid, and I don't think he's realizing that the pyramid is first of all, it's in the brain, right? Secondly, it's also the chakras, right? And so I don't think he gets that concept so much as he should. In it, I don't know if he ever really understood the concept properly. I can't say that he didn't, because I don't know. I never asked him any questions, but he didn't seem like he actually knew that as much as he should have from everything that Ra was saying to him. And I think that's one of the reasons why I interpret it, because I think that Don missed some stuff that was not being, that he wasn't catching. Either that, or he was just being the scientist that he was, and he was trying to be thorough. So I try to give him the benefit of the doubt that he was just trying to be thorough, and so he's asking questions. But sometimes he jumps back to the pyramid when I'm like, oh, you were almost on the edge of really getting some good information right here, and getting Ra to talk about it, and then he jumps back to it, changes the subject to something else. He did that early on when they were talking about UFOs. He was afraid to talk about UFOs because of how people saw them at the time and would laugh at you and not take you credible. So he kind of tried to stay away from aliens and all life that was non-human. Very quickly, by the end of the probably the 20th session, he didn't let Ra refer to that. And all of his questions stayed on either the physical plane or the spiritual plane, but also within parameters in a way that I think he was missing out. I've said this before, the way that he missed out on the explanation and catching and explaining to the world. But then again, it was 1981 when this started, between 81 and 84. So, looking back at that time when I wasn't talking about it either, because you couldn't, because people were just, even now, when I talk about aliens, people laugh at me about thinking that there's life on any other planet. It's just, it depends on the group of people and whether or not that person, particularly individually, is living in the flesh or not, or is awake enough, because they'll believe in gods and demons. They'll believe that there are demons that are trying to get your soul, that's hiding under your bed to get your soul, and but that there's no other life on another planet doing anything. So, you know what I mean? So that's what's weird about some people, that when they'll believe in one thing wholeheartedly, but they can't believe that there's other beings that are just third dimensional. And originally, and this is what I laugh about when I talk to people, because I'm like, originally on this earth, a couple of 100 years ago, people would tell you, okay, look at the time of Ragnar, which was in the 1100s, Ragnar Northbrook. He was saying that there's land out there to the west. And his own king at the time told him, there is nothing out there. So I'm not going to pay for an expedition for you to go out there and find something, because there's nothing there. This is as far as the land goes. Okay, so they were in I don't think it was even Norway. I think they were Geats. So they would have been in modern day Sweden. Okay. And that they knew of the land that is Norway, and that was it. There was nothing else. Nothing else. They're the ones who pioneered finding Iceland and Greenland and England. And when they went west from where they lived, they found England, which was an island off the coast of the mainland Europe, where there was already people living with the same technology that they had, an entire species of people living on the island of Alba, Scotland, Ireland, and England, living there at the time. And the Vikings didn't know about it in Europe, and they didn't believe there was anything there, because you were going to fall over the edge of the world if you sailed that far away from land where you couldn't see it. You would never find your way back, and you'd fall over the edge of the world, because the world was in fact flat, and there was an end of it, and the end of it had water pouring over it like a waterfall into nothingness. And so when people are saying there are no aliens out there in the universe, I look at them and go, you're just as simple-minded as the people from 1,500 years ago who didn't believe there was anything beyond their borders, and there was no such thing. And people go, well, that was a long time ago, and they were cavemen. And I look at them and say, you do realize that in 1942, there were Japanese people who had never seen a human being from Africa before. 1942, 43, 44, fighting in the Second World War, Japanese people fighting in the Pacific got their very first look at an African American. And we scared them, our military scared them, Japanese, by saying, these are our night fighters, because they didn't have to put on any makeup to fight at night, to be camouflaged, because they had dark skin. And so they freaked out. They had never seen Native Americans before either, so they didn't understand the language, and that's why we have the wind talkers, because the Native Americans spoke in, I think it was Navajo, that they spoke over the radios, and the Japanese didn't understand the concept because they had never heard the language before. So 80 years ago, okay, and there was people living on the islands in the Pacific 80 years ago who had never seen white people before. And when the Americans showed up, they thought they were gods. The same way Cortez, when he showed up, was received by the people of South America and Central America as a god. Okay, this was 80 years ago. This wasn't 1,000 years ago. This wasn't 10,000 years ago. This was in the modern 20th century, and we're just now 24 years into the 21st century. Okay? 80 years ago, there were people living on this earth who had never saw or knew about people from another portion of this earth, to the point where they were like, who is that? When the Americans went to Vietnam, they called us long noses compared to them, because they had small noses. We were so much bigger than them that they thought we were monkeys, that we were gorillas, that we were shaved down gorillas, because we were so much different than the people in Vietnam compared to what they looked like. So you have to realize that everybody's reality was only what they knew, because they didn't travel anywhere. So what makes you think that the difference between this planet and another planet in another solar system is any different than leaving Europe and coming to America and finding out people already lived here? There's no difference there. It's a matter of your perspective and whether or not you ventured out into the ocean yet. Do you see? All right, let's continue here. So we don't see reality for the way it is. We see reality the way we are. So people over here on this earth go, there's nothing out there. This entire universe, there's no one. It's just waiting for us to grow up and come find it. But we've thought that about every single piece of land on this earth. And every time we've gotten there, there's already people living there. What makes you think you're going to go to another planet and not find other people living there? Because the ones right next to us don't have anybody on them currently? And that's your motivation for believing that there's nothing out past the islands that we know about, because there's nobody living on those islands? Because that's what everybody has thought every single time, from every single country throughout all of time in this world, until we discovered the entire planet. And now everybody knows about the entire planet. Okay? And no one knew about the entire planet until they found the entire planet. And there were people who were already living on that entire planet. So it was only the entire planet when Europeans became aware of the entire planet, because Europeans are currently the ones that are in charge of this planet. So they had to acknowledge that there was other people living on the planet. And when they acknowledged that, then it became a thing. Doesn't mean there weren't people already living there, because there were. So the same concept is just because you don't want to believe there's anyone on another planet doesn't mean there's not. Well, if there were, they would have found us. That's arrogant. If there were people on another planet, surely they would be looking for us and they would come here. What if they're over there going, there's nothing out there? Because they haven't grown up enough to have the concept in their brain of something else being out there. There's nothing out there, because surely if anyone was out there, they'd be coming looking for us, because we're the center of the universe. Okay? That's a child saying if there were anybody there, they would find us in the universe, because they would be obviously looking for us because we're superior. Well, then we wouldn't be superior if they had the ability to fly from one place to another and came here. Never mind that now, they don't exist. They can't exist, because if they do, there's your arrogance of a self-serving individual. Because nobody is more advanced than we are, so therefore they can't exist. And if they do, they're just waiting for us to come find them and take them over and rape them and pillage them and take all of their stuff, because that's what we do to each other here. Because self-serving people do. Stupid is as stupid does. It doesn't change. So what makes you think we've changed at all since 1492 when Columbus sailed across the water thinking he was finding a path to India and found a whole new continent? And then when he got there, they started having sex with all the women and started killing all the men. That hasn't changed in 10,000 years. That hasn't changed in 100,000 years. It's exactly the same thing that everybody did in every single country throughout all of time. In 80 years ago, we did the same thing. Okay, so what makes us so much different from the people of the past? Nothing. We're identical. We conquer the same way people conquered 100,000 years ago. So that goes back to my point that nothing has changed. Technology is the only thing that's changed. That's it. Our psyche is identical throughout all of time.
For radiations, but only the third spiral from the top. And I'm also asking, would it be better to use a sixth?
Individuals change. Individuals ascend. Individuals then leave and don't come back. So the ones who are left behind from the rapture are the ones that are still in history. When entire cultures do that, they just disappear, like in South America and Central America. And then people go, who knows? We have no idea. They must have all just died and they all must have moved away. And then when science looks for that and they don't find all that, then that's when they believe in UFOs. Well, then it must have been somebody from another planet came down here and swooped up the entire population. Wait, what? And that's when the true origin of what they rather you have believe. They don't want you to believe in UFOs until you start believing in God. And then they'll rather have you believing in UFOs than God. There's a reason for that. Okay, let's continue.
60 degrees apex angle than the larger apex angle? Would it provide a better energy source? Ra, I am Ra. For energy through the apex angle, the Giza pyramid offers an excellent model. Simply be sure the pyramid is so small that there is no entity small enough to crawl inside it. 66.26 Questioner, I assume that this energy then, this spiraling light energy, is somehow...
No, who was it that said that? Cassie? No, when he's saying mad, he's European. He's Irish. He's saying crazy. People think that I'm mad when I talk about aliens in my local town. He's not saying angry. He's saying they think he's crazy. Because that's the truth of that. So he says, no, we don't think that you're mad because we come here with you. No, he's saying, well, unless you realize that he means they think he's crazy. But that's the way it is. It depends on, Peter said, let me read what Peter said to you so you guys know. He says, do people think that I'm mad when I talk about aliens in my local town? It always makes me think that they're not awake. Always they call me an idiot when I say something about life on other planets. Right. So, I mean, that's depending on the person, if they're lower vibration, if they're living in the eating of the tree of life, living in the flesh, living in the third dimension, and they're not in any way spiritual, they won't be open-minded enough. They won't be open enough to the concept. So people think I'm crazy too. They think I'm insane because I'll say life on and they laugh. But then those same people generally will also think I'm crazy if I talk about spirituality. If I'm not trying to sell a religion, they don't get it. So if I'm not trying to convert them to Christianity, if you're over here in the United States, and I'm not trying to convert them to a religion, they don't understand the concept. And when I'm speaking as a neutral spirituality, like my book, right? Like what's written on the back of my shirt, religion recruits you, spirituality waits for you to find it, which is a direct quote from my book, that they don't understand that concept because I'm not coming at them from the normal angle of trying to sell them a religion. And they always assume that I am trying to sell them a religion. And I talk about that. If I say to somebody, are you spiritual? They'll go, I'm not religious. I didn't ask if you're religious. I asked if you were spiritual. Because religion recruits you, spirituality waits for you to find it. And then they get the concept when I put it to them that way, which is why I thought it was weird that when I tried to look that quote up, that nobody in history on this planet has ever said that. I'm like, what? So if nothing else ever comes out of my book, that quote in and of itself is a concept. Just that quote by itself is a concept that is waking people up. Every person who reads my book, almost everybody tells me, yeah, I highlighted that, especially if I don't tell them that I'm the one who said that, right? And I let them read the book. They're like, I highlighted this passage that you said. I'm like, what's that? The first thing they highlight is religion recruits you, spirituality waits for you to find it. Because that concept tells you there's something other than religion. And it feels right to most people because religion in and of themselves feel wrong to most people. And it's not because the message of the religion is wrong. It's because the semantical practice of that religion or thereof is wrong, because those parts were parts that humans put into the religion to get people under their control. And people kind of feel that about religions, that they're trying to control you with all of these laws that they have in these ways that you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do this and you can't do that. And they feel that that's wrong. Instinctively, they realize we have free will here. And even in those religions, it says that you have free will. Well, if I have free will, then how come there's 6,000 laws? Right? Never mind that now. Shut up and do what I tell you to do, or we'll excommunicate you. We'll kick you out and won't let you talk to anybody else in our religion. That's the first sign that you're in a cult. No matter what they say about themselves, the first sign is if they threaten you, and there's a penalty. And that's why Jesus was utilizing that then, because everything in the Hebrew religion back then was you would get killed for it. If you question authority, you get killed, right? Everything is put to death if you don't listen. And in the modern era, it's still that way in some religions, right? You look at any of the zealot parts of any of the religions, they still want to put you to death and stone you for being wrong, right? That was never written into any of the stories that were originally told, that were when they said this came from God. God didn't say, I'm going to kill you if you don't listen to what I have you say. It's the stories that came after that people were saying God said, and you don't have any proof that it came from God, where they started killing people to shut them up. That was control, semantical things that they implemented themselves for control. And if it didn't work, they came out with like the witch's hammer and the witch hunts to control women, to shut them up. If you didn't shut up, they would kill you, call you a witch. And if they called you a witch, their witch trials meant you died no matter what, because they would throw you in water. And if you didn't drown in the water, you were a witch, because witches were made of wood and they would float. So if you survived, they would kill you. If you died, they'd go, well, I guess she wasn't a witch, but they shut you up and you died. So either way, when the witch trial started and someone called you a witch and they had to put you on trial, that meant you were going to die. You were not going to survive. Because the only way that they could prove to the world that you weren't a witch was that you had to die. And then if you didn't die when they tried to kill you, that proved you were a witch, in which case they had to kill you. Do you see? So it didn't matter. It was a matter of fooling the children into believing that you were a witch no matter what, because you didn't agree with them, because you wouldn't shut up. So they were killing you because they needed women to be stifled as long as they could, because the women are the feminine energy, which was going to unlock the men and keep the men from staying in the lower vibration. So they had to kill the women and shut them up and keep you guys under wraps as long as they could to keep control. That was the devil being unleashed on the earth for a time. until the time when the feminine energy could no longer be stifled. And eventually the people would stop listening to the devil, and even the devil within themselves. That's the whole purpose of this ecosystem and the way things were supposed to go on purpose. All right, let's continue.
How absorbed by the energy field of the body. Is this somehow connected to the indigo energy center? Am I correct in this guess? Ra, I am Ra. This is incorrect. The properties of this energy are such as to move within the field of the physical complex and irradiate.
Thank you, Peter. Peter said that he put it in an order for my book. He's just waiting for his bank to approve it so that he can get the book mailed to him. Thank you, brother. In fact, here, let me do that while I'm sitting here. While we're talking about that, I'm going to go ahead and do the commercial for my book here. Pay the bills. I'll do the short one. Right? No, we'll do the other one here. We'll do the long one here. We'll do pay the bills.
What is the reality about reality? Returning to the old ways. It is a comprehensive book about what is really going on here on this planet. It talks about the true spirituality that the controllers who think they own this planet have been keeping from you for thousands of years. It explains to you the knowledge that you gain from the universe itself when you live the way the prophets of the world throughout time told us how to live. Eat right, meditate, take care of yourself, treat others right. All the things they originally told us to do, but the controllers have removed from right in front of our eyes. The way to ascend to heaven. The reality about reality. Returning to the old ways. On sale worldwide online now.
Okay, so had to get the commercial in at least at some point, and that way I don't have to read what it says on the screen, because the other one doesn't say anything until the end of the 20-second video. So this one is all the script that I wrote. It's all speaking. Okay, so the information that is in that book is a good beginner information. It's pulling you by the end of the book. You'll either think I'm crazy, mad as a hatter, as Peter was talking about. Most people won't finish the book. The general population, even the alien theorists, will love and enjoy the beginning of the book, and they'll like the end. They won't enjoy the beginning of the book and may not make it to the end of the book. But if they do, they'll enjoy the end of the book, because they believe in UFOs. They believe in aliens. But those who are spiritual minded that don't believe in aliens will read the book, agree with everything that I'm saying until they get to the very end, and then they'll go, this guy made it all up and he's crazy, even though they agreed with everything that I said prior to that. I'm aware of that. The book is written in a way that is only supposed to help people to expand their consciousness, because I'm beginning to tell you what is already out there that you're supposed to realize on your own anyways. So people are either going to love it or hate it, depending on where they are in their own spirituality, depending on where they are in their own journey, as it were, right? Okay, let me continue here. Wait a minute, I got to get back into the studio, and my computer is freezing and not letting me in the studio. There it goes. I don't know what that was about, but my computer wasn't letting me get it back into the studio right then. Okay, so let me continue here with this.
Each cell of the space/time body, and, as this is done, irradiate also the time/space equivalent, which is closely aligned with the space/time yellow ray body. This is not a function of the etheric body or of free will. This is a radiation much like your sun's rays. Thus it should be used with care. 66.27 Questioner. How many applications of 30 minutes or less during a diurnal period would be appropriate? Ra, I am Ra. In most cases, no more than one. In a few cases, especially where the energy will be used for spiritual work, experimentation with 2 shorter periods might be possible, but any feeling of sudden weariness would be a sure sign that the entity had been over-radiated. 66.28 Questioner. Can this energy help in any way as far as healing of physical distortions? Ra, I am Ra. There is no application for direct healing using this energy, although, if used in conjunction with meditation, it may offer to a certain percentage of entities some aid in meditation. In most cases it is most helpful in alleviating weariness and in the stimulation of physical or sexual activity. 66.29 Questioner. In a transition from 3rd to 4th density we have 2 other possibilities other than the type that we are experiencing now. We have the possibility of a totally positively polarized harvest and the possibility of a totally negatively polarized harvest that I understand have occurred elsewhere in the universe many times. When there is a totally negatively polarized harvest, when a whole planet, that is, has negatively polarized, it makes the transition from 3rd to 4th density. Does the planet have...
I thought you realized that. At first, I didn't think, Cassie, that you realized it until I read what you said. And then I was like, okay, she knows that. She understands that. She's crazy, mad, right? Yeah. Sorry, I was getting a message while we're doing this. I'm being messaged at the same time. So I was trying to figure that out as well while I was hitting play here and then reading what everybody was saying in here. All right, so let's continue here.
The experience of the distortion of disease that this planet now experiences prior to that transition. Ra, I am Ra. You are perceptive. The negative harvest is one of intense disharmony and the planet will express this. 66.30 Questioner. The planet has a certain set of conditions prior to transition into fourth density, that is in late third density, and then the conditions are different in early fourth density. Could you give me an example of a negatively polarized...
Right, Risen Nation. I apologize. I keep meaning to do that and I don't do it. Risen Nation says, "Why is there no link for your book in the description?" I always forget to do that when they put that on there. And StreamYard has a studio that I can set up that has all of that. That's just a recurrent studio, so that every time I come in, I don't have to reset everything up, and I just don't do it. But I should put the description of my book or a link to my book. If you go to my Facebook page, on Facebook, if you go on Facebook to my Facebook page, there is a link there that you can grab, but I don't have it in the description. I don't know why I don't put it in there. I'm going to have to start putting it in the description so that when maybe I'll put it first and then have you have the description for my book or the link for my book and then have the description for the show for the Law of One. In that, I don't know where I would put that, because if you put it at the end, a lot of people don't read the whole description to find it. So I'm going to have to start adding that so that it's there, so that people who watch, because I'm also, people are listening to it on the MP3 file, and so that doesn't have a description. When I put that on, I have to do that as well, because after I convert the file after the show here, then I'll go live and put that on the out for the world in the MP3 broadcast, but I also don't put the link for the book there, but I do the commercial. And that's why I did the commercial that I did this time, because it tells you the name of the book and where to get it. So you can just Google it, or whatever search engine if you put my name in or type in the whole description, The Reality About Reality, Returning to the Old Ways. Let me pull this down so you can see it. It's on my shirt. If you type that into any search engine, it'll give you a link right there to my book, to either Amazon or to my publisher or somebody else that's selling it. And you'll be able to buy it because it's worldwide online. You can buy it in any country except for like North Korea, maybe Russia, and definitely not in China. Any of the places where they don't want anybody to have a religion or spirituality, you won't be able to get the book there. But if you're in any other country on the world where they allow religion, you can buy it and have it shipped to you. Okay, let's continue.
Planet and the conditions in late third density and early fourth density so that I can see how they change. Ra, I am Ra. The vibrations from third to fourth density change on a negatively oriented planet precisely as they do upon a positively oriented planet. With fourth density negative comes many abilities and possibilities of which you are familiar. The fourth density is more dense and it is far more difficult to hide the true vibrations of the mind/body/spirit complex. This enables fourth density negatives, as well as positives, the chance to form social memory complexes. It enables negatively oriented entities the opportunity for a different set of parameters with which to show their power over others and to be of service to the self. The conditions are the same as far as the vibrations are concerned. 66.31 Questioner. I was concerned about the amount of physical distortions, disease, and that sort of thing in third density negative just before harvest and in fourth density negative just after harvest or in transition. What are the conditions of the physical problems, disease, etc., at late third density negative? Ra, I am Ra. Each planetary experience is unique. The problems, shall we say, of bellicose actions are more likely to be of pressing concern to late third density negative entities than the Earth's reactions to negativity of the planetary mind, for it is often by such warlike attitudes on a global scale that the necessary negative polarization is achieved. As fourth density occurs, there is a new planet and new physical vehicle system gradually expressing itself, and the parameters of bellicose actions become those of thought rather than manifested weapons.
So the transformation changes all of that. Cassie was saying that Ra didn't Raw was saying not in the lower metals, because as we are transitioning, the negative starts to go away. So what happens is everybody starts getting pulled up into the higher 3 chakras, and so that changes the dynamic. And this is what I was referring to for the last couple of weeks, knowing that eventually we would get to where Ra was talking about here, because people talk about in the religions, even the spiritual, in the Christian Bibles, where there's a new earth, there's a new heaven, and this is what they were referring to, even when those were written thousands of years ago, was the knowledge of this, the creation. As we transition, all of the physical violence and manifestation starts to wane, starts to go away as we move. And this is why I said there isn't going to be a time where we're sitting here and like I'll be doing the show and then I'm not one of the left behind, so I'll literally just disappear. And you'll be like, what the hell just happened to Leo? And you'll be on a flight to Burma or something, and the pilot disappears and you're one of the left behind. Now the plane crashes and kills everybody. Or you're on the highway driving in rush hour and the car next to you is a ghost rider now because the driver disappeared and the car is going on its own until it crashes into something. And that's what they have you believe in these religions, that's what's going to happen. And there's going to be all these people winking out. And the entire Left Behind series from the 90s going into the 2000s would have you believe that. And they were giving you this doomsday scenario of fear, saying that, this is the life of all the people who were left behind, and they're suffering and what they're going through now as they have to now repent their ways. Well, according to their own scenario, that once they're left behind, they're there forever. They don't get to move up anymore. You're stuck. You're in hell now. That's what their religion was teaching. But when they did the Left Behind series, they were like, oh, no, but you can be redeemed if you change your ways. So they went against their own religion when they made the Left Behind series, because they were saying, well, the Left Behind can happen and you could be one of the left behind, but it doesn't mean now they're departing from the religion itself, because their religion says once there's the judgment, you're trapped in hell for all of eternity now. And that's what they taught for 1,000 years, a couple thousand years. That's what they taught. And then in the 90s, they just broke from that and said, well, no, not necessarily. It's going to suck. And you're going to have to try and figure shit out, but you can still change your ways and then make it to the bus. Right. And so, wait a minute. So which is it? You guys have been teaching for thousands of years that there's a judgment. And when that judgment happens, whoever doesn't get to go is then going to go to this purgatory, this hell, for the rest of existence, and they can never get out. And that is what the churches have been teaching throughout all of time. And now all of a sudden you're backtracking on that and going, well, it's not really that bad. So which is it? And then they wonder why people turned away from the churches and went, you guys don't even know what you're talking about, because now you're changing your story. And so then when you get to that idea, people go, oh, there goes that rapture again. So what, am I going to be the one of the left behind? And then they're like, oh, well, no, you can still repent your ways. Well, then that means I don't have to worry about repenting my ways now. I can repent my ways later if it gets serious. Well, no, you have to do it now. Or what? Are you going to go back on your story now? So all of a sudden people are like, I call bullshit on your entire religion, because now you're changing your story depending on what I'm saying to you. Your laws claim that I have to be put to death if I look at you wrong, and that now if I'm not one of the chosen, I go to hell forever in your history until today, and then you're telling me I can still repent my ways. So then I'm telling you, well, then I don't have to worry about it until the bus comes, and then I know I'm one of the left behind, and then I'll change, and you're now telling me that's not how it works. But you just told me that's how it works. So then people wonder, because of the church is now they're contradicting themselves, and then people wonder, the churches wonder, what's motivating people to stop trusting us? Well, you're lying to them and you're making shit up. And you're going back and forth on what you're saying. It's either one thing or the other, right? That's what you're saying forever. It was this way. And now you're going, well, it's not necessarily that way, but you need to hurry up and make a choice. Why? Because if I can repent afterwards, then what do I have to worry about now? Do you see? So it's hard to sell. So selling the lie to begin with and not changing it back. And I guess they're at least trying to change it now. You got to tell them what everybody knew prior to you telling the lie, that you're going to be left behind. And that's that you're supposed to be doing this and learning this for yourself, and you're supposed to make that choice. And you will never graduate until you do make that choice. It's not there's a wall and there's a God coming back and a bus to come get you. And if you're not on the list, you don't get to come in ever. Oh, unless you repent, then you can come in one. When the next bus comes, when's that? Oh, I don't know. We haven't made that part of the story up yet. I mean, you can then, come in. So the messaging that they were teaching to control you doesn't work when you put it under scrutiny, and then they get mad at you, and then they chase you away. And then people stop going to their churches because they realize that they're making shit up. And then the church is like, well, what do we got to do to get people to come to our churches? How about tell them the truth and stop fucking around with the religion, and tell them, teach spirituality the way that the prophet that you're claiming you follow was actually teaching in the beginning. Hence my book, The Reality About Reality, returning to the old ways. That doesn't mean, a lot of people got mad at me because you're here in America, because they were claiming that Donald Trump was trying to take us back to Nazi Germany. So when people saw my book, Returning to the Old Ways, they're like, we're not going back to the old ways because you must be one of those Trumpers. You want us to go back to in slavery. And I'm like, no, actually, my book is about spirituality, not that evil religion. It's about the good spirituality. And returning to the old ways means that when those evil people took control of the churches and corrupted them into lies to control you, they did that across the board to all religions, and people in the religions are aware of it, and they're fighting against it within the religions, even though their bosses are telling them to sell you a certain narrative. They're trying to give you the truth that's still there in all of those religions. And if you look at all of the religions and you study them, you find that out. And so you got to stop listening to the negative crap that they're teaching you, the semantical things. Moses got 10 laws from God. The Hebrews turned that into 6,000 laws. The Christians did the same thing. He was teaching his disciples a certain group of laws. There was 10 of them, and they turned that the Jew or the Christian religion now has like 6,000 laws. Okay, so humans are getting control of these things, and they're going, but you can't not listen to me because I know what I'm talking about. So if you don't listen to me, you're kicked out. Jesus never said that. Neither did Moses. Neither did any of the prophets from any of the religions. Originally, it was after they were gone, when other people wanted control, and they said, if you don't listen to me, you're going to go to hell. If you don't listen to me, you don't get to come in heaven. If you don't listen to me, we're going to kick you out. If you don't listen to me, we're going to kill you. Okay? None of those people and none of those prophets originally said any of those things because they were in service to others, not in service to self. People that are self-serving are the ones that are threatening your life and your existence if you don't do what they tell you to do. So what are you saying here? Cassie said, no, the pyramid that they used in their channeling session is what I was referring to. Oh, okay. So that, but see, now you're kind of doing what Dawn did, and you're obsessing on the pyramid itself. The pyramid is a tool. Okay. The pyramid is actually inside your brain. Okay. It's literally inside your brain. The physical pyramid creates the same thing that your brain creates in the upper chakras, in your pineal gland and your pituitary gland. Creates the eye of Horus, which everybody calls the eye of Ra. If you look at that image, the eye itself is your third eye, and the little doohickey that comes off the bottom, which looks like the little thing that hangs off of a turkey's gullet, is your pineal gland. Okay, so the pyramid itself just creates that. If they have it underneath Carla, it just creates the vibration that is assisting her with the meditation to get into a place to be able to tune herself as an antenna to communicate with Ra. So if you can't get into that place without assistance from the pyramid, you can use a pyramidal shape and have it a certain distance underneath your head, so that it actually vibrates and gets you into that place. You have to remember that Carla was doing this 42 years ago, 43 years ago, when she was doing this. Again, when Dawn was asking 42 years ago, should we be turning the pyramid on to go inside the pyramid, Ra was saying that was 12,000 years ago, and you don't need that pyramid anymore. Furthering that, from 42 years ago, we don't need that pyramid to achieve what Carla needed the pyramid to achieve, just like In the 1960s, people needed the psychedelic drugs, the psilocybin, the DMT, the ayahuasca, to achieve that place of meditation, to be pulled out of body, to then have the experience of infinite wisdom and the infinity itself. We are now doing that in the modern era without having to do those drugs, but people can still do those to enhance that meeting of the soul, of your integration backward to your higher self. We don't need any of those tools anymore because of the entire species of this earth has moved past the need for that, right? So if you want to, we can talk about it off camera, because I'm running out of time. We can talk about it off camera, and I can give you that so you can try it, just so you can experience it and feel that vibration. But you need to be careful, and that's why I didn't want to just throw it at you right now, because there are some parameters that if you get it wrong, you could scramble your molecules a little bit and screw up your brain. So being in the pyramid, inside of the big pyramid, or if you build one and sit in it, you have to build it to the right specifications, because it's going to affect your physical condition. So if you wanted to, depending on the chakra that you're going to tune it to, is another reason why I'm not just jumping into the description, talking about it right here, because what he was referring to was that the lower vibrations, depending on where they were, because he was always talking about the king's chamber. That chamber is the king's chamber is inside your head, and the queen's chamber is the pituitary gland. The king's chamber is the third eye in your head, where the pyramid rests in your entire skull, from your teeth up to the top of your head. Okay, so the queen's chamber is below the king's chamber, and it's offset. Why? Because your pituitary gland is a little bit more forward than your third eye, which is more here. So if you look at it from the sideways, that's why I say if you look at the image that I give you in the video of the Eye of Horus, that everybody calls the Eye of Ra, you'll see that the eye itself is slightly out of position below it, and it's a little bit more in front of the eye itself, because that's the way it is in your head. The pituitary gland is down here, and it's a little bit more forward behind your nasal cavity, behind your eyes, whereas the third eye is above and a little bit more forward towards the front of your head. And so the queen's chamber of the pyramidal position was offset, if you're looking at it, justified to north, south, east, west. So you'll see that's what they're talking about. Okay. So, but Ra didn't fully understand, right? So yeah, because Ra didn't fully answer. Because the reason Ra didn't fully answer was because the description had already been given to, and usually he gets snarky and says, we already covered this in an earlier thing, but he didn't this time. But he already covered that information 3 sessions ago, maybe 4, throughout everything, because he keeps going back to the pyramids. That was already discussed, and he was assuming, they were assuming that Dawn realized that, and so he didn't get into a description again to repeat that. And so far as I know, because this is the actual transcripts from the recording, so it wasn't like they edited this out. So the book has edits that the recordings that I use come from their recording, their actual text. So he didn't explain it to Dawn at all during the session, but that's why, because it's kind of a long drawn out process for that understanding. I'm sorry that I didn't answer that and realize that's what you were talking about before when you made that comment. I moved off of the pyramid and into the spiritual, because that's where Ra had gone. So yeah, so you're talking about the tool using during the channeling session under the bed. Yeah. That's the pyramid that they have under the bed, and so the distance, the size of it and the distance of it from Carla's head was already described earlier on in the sessions as to where and why and what that vibration would help tune it. And that's what I'm explaining to you. And the reason that Dawn didn't get the answer from Ra is because Dawn already knew that, and Ra was asking more about what the process was than what the physical process needs to be to make that happen. And that's why Ra didn't explain that here, right? Right. No, I get that. Yeah, she said it's hard to remember some of the stuff when it's been 2 years of classes. No, I'm okay with that. Otherwise I would have just said to you, go back and listen and leave you to try and figure it out yourself. That's why I didn't say that to you, because that was, a while ago. So it's not your fault that you didn't remember that, because I bet you no one else did either. Right. So that's why that Ra didn't get into the specifics of it, but even for them, well, it was the same year, because this is still in 1981. I don't think, no, we're in 1982 now. So there's only been a year for Dawn since Ra told this information. So even for Dawn asking questions, it's between 1981 and 1984, 3-year time period, right? But right now it's 1982. All right, let's continue here.
66.32 Questioner. Well then, is physical disease and illness as we know it on this planet rather widespread on a 3rd density negative planet just before harvest into 4th density negative? Ra. I am Ra. Physical complex distortions of which you speak are likely to be less found as 4th density negative begins to be a probable choice of harvest due to the extreme interest in the self which characterizes the harvestable 3rd density negative entity. Much more care is taken of the physical body, as well as much more discipline being offered to the self mentally. This is an orientation of great self-interest and self-discipline. There are still instances of the types of disease which are associated with the mind complex distortions of negative emotions such as anger. However, in an harvestable entity, these emotional distortions are much more likely to be used as catalyst in an expressive and destructive sense as regards the object of anger.
Yeah, I've never.
6.33 Questioner.
I've never been in the pyramids. I don't know why that wasn't stopping. I've never been in the pyramids. Because Penny said it would still be interesting to do, and Cassie said thank you for understanding my thoughts. Furthering that, I've never been in the pyramids, but I would love to go in the pyramids just to experience the energy inside the pyramid myself, because it still vibrates with the energy that changes your way of thinking when you go in there. When Napoleon went in to the pyramid back then, when he went in there, he came out scared, not because he was afraid of the dark, or maybe because he was afraid of the dark, but I think the energy of the pyramid when he was in there changed his psyche, and it freaked him out because he was not in any way not really spiritual, so it kind of freaked him out. So some people go in there and they're like, oh, I don't know about this place. And other people go in there and go, wow, it's so peaceful and calm in here because of what it does to them. So I've never been in the pyramid. I would love to experience that myself, right? But if you're meditating and you're moving into that place of, outside of the reach of the thinking mind and the ego, you're actually moving into that vibration anyways. You just don't know that that's what's doing it until you have an outside source giving you the same vibratory pattern that affects you. That's why I talked about last week about using sage, white sage, because that sage puts you into that same place. So if you sage yourself and you smell that, or frankincense and myrrh also does the same thing. It raises your vibration and pulls you into that same vibratory pattern that the pyramid would put you into. That's why they use them in churches. That's why they use them in meditation. That's why they use them in spirituality. And white sage repels evil. Why is that? Because it pulls you into a positive place. And so people that are in service to self don't want to have any part of it. Evil doesn't want to have any part of it, because it actually pulls you into the same realm of vibration, the vibratory pattern that the pyramid itself would achieve inside or out.
The way that disease and bodily distortions are generated with respect to polarities, both positive and negative. It seems that they are generated in some way to create the split or polarization, that they have a function in creating the original polarization that occurs in 3rd density. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is not precisely correct. Distortions of the bodily or mental complex are those distortions found in beings which have need of experiences which aid in polarization. These polarizations may be those of entities which have already chosen the path or polarization to be followed. It is more likely for positively oriented individuals to be experiencing distortions within the physical complex due to the lack of consuming interest in the self and the emphasis on service to others. Moreover, in an unpolarized entity, catalyst of the physical distortion nature will be generated at random. The hopeful result is, as you say, the original choice of polarity. Oftentimes this choice is not made, but the catalyst continues to be generated. In the negatively oriented individual, the physical body is likely to be more carefully tended and the mind disciplined against physical distortions. 66.34 Questioner. This planet, to me, seems to be what I would call a cesspool of distortions. This includes all diseases and malfunctions of the physical body in general. It would seem to me that, on the average, this planet would be very very high on the list if we just took the overall amount of these problems. Is my feeling correct in this assumption? Ra, I am Ra. We will review previous material. Catalyst is offered to the entity. If it is not used by the mind complex, it will then filter through to the body complex and manifest as some form of physical distortion. The more efficient the use of catalyst, the less physical distortion to be found. There are, in the case of those you call wanderers, not only a congenital difficulty in dealing with the third density vibratory patterns but also a recollection, however dim, that these distortions are not necessary or usual in the home vibration. We overgeneralize as always, for there are many cases of pre-incarnative decisions which result in physical or mental limitations and distortions, but we feel that you are addressing the question of widespread distortions towards misery of one form or another. Indeed, on some third density planetary spheres catalyst has been used more efficiently. In the case of your planetary sphere there is much inefficient use of catalyst and, therefore, much physical distortion. We have enough energy available for one query at this time. 66.35 Questioner, then I will ask if there is anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or improve the contact. Ra, I am Ra. Continue as always in love. All is well. You are conscientious. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite creator. Adonai.
See, so literally, Don was like, well, if we just change a few things, then will that change the entire species? And Ra was like, well, yeah, but it takes inner reflection by everybody to do so. And he couldn't get into telling a lot about that scenario at that time, 40 years ago. But I mean, the answer ultimately is yes, but it takes all individuals to do that. And people don't realize that even the wanderers that came here, there's the prime directive to not interfere. So even though we're here and we're trying to assist the uplift of all the vibration of what's here, we can only give the information that everybody's ready for. So we can, by example, and by the only way we can cheat, because they're cheating and changing things, is we get here, and then by our very nature of being here, we're raising the vibration up for the positive. And people are like, well, that's cheating. Well, it is, but they came here and changed history and made everybody fall, and they're holding them here. So they're actually going against the what is supposed to be. So by us being here and just being, even though we're veiled and veiled until we're not, we can't change the natural course of things. The only thing we can do is raise the vibratory pattern to give it back the equal footing that they're supposed to have. So we can't interfere with everybody. We can only answer questions when they're asked. So you guys have to ask us questions. So I can give you general knowledge, but I can't give you all of the secrets to the universe until you ask. And if you ask in a setting like this, I can only tell the world what it is ready to hear. So that's why I tell people individually or in a smaller group, if we're not on air and to the world and we're in a smaller group, I can give better answers to you guys than I can, because then I can go by the general population of whoever's in that group. So like on Wednesday, when I do that, if there's only 3 or 4 of you in there, I can give you more information that I can't hear, because this is going out to the entire world, and the information that I can give can only be the average of the entire population of the earth and what they're ready for. In an individual, I can give you far more. I can give you whatever you're ready for. So whenever you put in a second or a third or a fourth person, that average will either go up or down depending on the where everybody is. Do you see? So that's the way that it works. So even for the wanderers who come here to help, they still they can't break free will. So that's literally what Ra was saying there at the very end. Okay, I got to go because it's now almost 6:30. I should have got off here about a half an hour ago or a little bit more. I got to get my mom in the shower and then get dinner for us, which I'm now running late for because I waited longer because I wanted to go ahead and finish this session. This session had 32 questions or 34 questions instead of like 18 or 20. So it took longer. And even though, me talking, of course, makes it go longer. All right, guys, I love you guys. I'll see you guys. I won't be on Wednesday. I'll be back on Friday. So Wednesday, I won't be doing the the Q&A on Wednesday because I'll be doing Thanksgiving here. And then Thursday's Thanksgiving, so most people probably won't want to show up. So I'm not going to do it on Thursday. But Friday, even though it's Black Friday, I'm still going to probably do the Law of One. We'll see. If it looks like nobody's going to show up, maybe I'll do a short version. We'll find out. If no one shows up next week because you guys are all out partying still or shopping or whatever, maybe I'll just do a short thing or just throw it out there for people and they can hear it around the world because a lot of people outside of this country, they're not going to be doing any Thanksgiving. It's just the United States. All right, guys. I love you guys. Have a great night. I'll see you guys later. All right. Have a good night.